Chapter 201. The sound of explosions was incessant. It was like a fireworks show on a summer night, and the sky was filled with dazzling brilliance. Although Nangongzhi knew a little about Xiao Nan's strength through his previous investigation, when Xiao Nan really used her paper to fight against Dead Ale, Nangongzhi felt that he had underestimated Xiao Nan. It was clearly such a soft and fragile paper, but in Xiao Nan's hands, it changed endlessly. One moment it was like a blade, the next it was like a shield, and it could even turn into wings to let her fly in the sky. I can't let you monopolize the limelight like this. Nangongzhi didn't know why, but he felt a tinge of anger in his heart. Seeing Xiao Nan fight wantonly like a valkyrie on the battlefield, even Nangongzhi's somewhat low desire to fight was ignited. Nangongzhi held the Tribulation Sword in his hand. Countless sword chi constantly emerged from the Tribulation Sword, constantly wrapping around the Tribulation Sword. He let go of the sword, and the Tribulation Sword floated in front of him. At this moment, the sword chi was no longer a sharp weapon for attacking, but like pieces of building blocks that were constantly pieced together. Not long after, a long dragon formed by sword chi appeared in front of him. Nangongzhi waved his hand, and the Tribulation Sword, which had been wrapped into a ball, flew towards the dragon's head. The entire sword chi dragon was instantly activated. The huge dragon roared towards the sky, and the dragon's roar was earth-shattering. Even Xiao Nan and Dead Ale, who were focused on the battle, couldn't help but be attracted by the scene here. Nangongzhi slowly stepped into the sword chi dragon's reverse scale. Then, the sword chi dragon immediately soared into the sky and arrived next to Dead Ale's C2 dragon. Nangongzhi didn't say anything, and just gave Xiao Nan a look. According to the battle plan, Nangongzhi was the one who should be entangled with Dead Ale, and Xiao Nan should be waiting for an opportunity to obtain Dead Ale's blood. Nangongzhi's expression was noticed by Xiao Nan, and she instantly understood. She flapped her wings and distanced herself from Dead Ale. Hey, woman. We haven't finished fighting yet. Why are you running away? After seeing Conan retreat, Dead Ale said with dissatisfaction. Wouldn't it be better for me to be your opponent? Long-range attacks are really boring. Nangongzhi looked at Dead Ale, who seemed to be angry, and said with a smile. What do you know? When my art explodes, no matter near or far, I will feel happy. Hey, I haven't even finished speaking and you've already made a move. Is it that boring? That's right, when Dead Ale was still talking about his own artistic views, Nangongzhi had already rushed towards Dead Ale with a long sword chi dragon. The long sword chi dragon was composed of sword chi. As the chi of martial arts, the lethality of sword chi was naturally self-evident. When Nangongzhi's long sword chi dragon and Dead Ale's C2 dragon brushed past each other, the sword chi of Nangongzhi's long sword chi dragon suddenly erupted. Like peeling a potato, it abruptly scraped a lot of clay from the C2 dragon. The clay immediately exploded under the stimulation of sword chi, and there was a lot of explosion smoke in the air. However, the long sword chi dragon was like a fish in the river. It was free and did not receive the slightest impact. Dead Ale was squatting on the C2 dragon's body, commanding it. The shock wave of the explosion naturally affected Dead Ale, causing his body to sway for a while. In the past, it was his own explosive clay that made his opponents confused, but this time it was him who got hit. The feeling of being pecked in the eye by a wild goose made Dead Ale's heart very uncomfortable. Ah, you bastard, this uncle will not let you go. You just wait for this uncle to blow you into a piece of black charcoal. I guarantee that your mother won't recognize you. Speaking of which, since Dead Ale became a ninja, it was basically smooth sailing. He became the disciple of a Wagakure's Tsuchikage, carried out many dangerous tasks. Even if he defected from the ninja village, he lived a carefree life. He was even happier than when he was a ninja in Iwagakure. It was really fun to bully ninjas who were weaker than him. But this time, Nangongzhi and the others actually dared to go against him, making him suffer a little loss in front of his most proficient explosive ninjutsu. This really made Dead Ale's mind very confused. Looking at Dead Ale's furious look, Nangongzhi could only chuckle embarrassedly. In Dead Ale's eyes, Nangongzhi's image at the moment overlapped with the image of the old man Inoki. Obviously, there was no reprimand, but the look in his eyes clearly said, "Kid, don't be so mischievous. You won't be cute if you continue like this." The reason why Dedale defected from Iwagakure was because he felt that he didn't get the attention he deserved. Nangong's eyes at the moment were like coaxing a child, and it hurt Dedale's sensitive and fragile heart. Explosive clay, two-winged bird. The mouth in Dedale's hand suddenly wriggled and spat out several clay birds with two wings. It was similar to the small birds that chased the Akatsuki's ninja. With a few hand seals, the two-winged bird was also activated. The two-winged bird's speed was far faster than the small birds released when chasing the Akatsuki's ninja. It was like a sharp arrow rushing toward Nangongja. Not to mention that these two-winged birds were made of explosive clay. With such speed and their sharp beaks, no one would feel good if they hit them. "You want to hit me with these? Did you stay in Iwagakure for a long time, and your brain turned to dust?" Nangongja deliberately ridiculed. The angrier Dedale was, the more focused his attention on Nangongja, the more chance Conan had to get Dedale's blood. Compared to Nangongja, Dedale was still a little too inexperienced. Dedale's emotions were almost in the hands of Nangongja. At this moment, Dedale was really angry. He seemed to have forgotten that there was still Conan spying on him. Instead, he increased the output of chakra, making the two-winged birds fly faster. Nangongja smiled easily and slowly stretched out his right hand that had been clenched into a fist. With a light flick of his index finger, the sword chi dragon had changed according to Nangongja's will. Several sword chi separated from the sword chi dragon and quickly collided with the two-winged birds. When the explosion sounded, several sword chi not only did not dissipate, but also flew toward Dedale at a faster speed. Chapter 202. Deidara didn't react in time, and his chest was directly penetrated by the sword energy. But the strange thing was that Dedale didn't bleed at all where the sword energy passed through. Instead, a huge hole appeared in his chest like a clay puppet. There were even many fissure-like things that spread all over his body. Not long after that, Deidara had turned into a pile of debris. "Tiske, a substitute?" Nangongja couldn't help but click his tongue, expressing his dissatisfaction. This is the most annoying thing about ninjas. Obviously, a sword pierced through his chest and he couldn't be more dead, but it directly poured a bucket of cold water on him and turned him into a pile of dregs. Even if Nangongja was well-informed and experienced, he still felt indignant when encountering such a situation. Where is Deidara's body? When Deidara first appeared, he was squatting on the giant bird to control the giant bird. When he used C2 Dragon, Deidara was still squatting on C2 Dragon, which proved that large clay creations required Deidara to be in an extremely close distance to control. Nangongja thought about it, and he naturally had a guess in his heart. If there was no accident, Deidara must be hiding himself in the body of C2 Dragon at this moment. That huge body is not easy to form a strong enough shield. However, it was still unclear when Dedale had summoned such a substitute and hid his true body. It seems that I'm also confused by the situation. Conan hasn't made a move yet. It's very likely that the Deidara fighting with me is not the main body. These guys, each more cunning than the other. Glancing in the direction of Conan, Nangongja quickly refocused his gaze on C2 Dragon. Just now, I used Sword Energy Dragon to cut off some clay on the shell of C2 Dragon. Deidara was also affected when it exploded, which proves that the effect of this explosive clay is not directional. As long as it is stimulated to a certain extent, the explosive clay will explode by itself. On the other hand, Dedale was in a huge ball of explosive clay. If he detonated the C2 Dragon, then wouldn't Dedale be seriously injured? After making up his mind, Nangongja did not hesitate at all. He immediately rode his sword Aura Dragon and clashed with the C2 Giant Dragon. This time, the sword chi of the sword chi dragon was not completely released like the first time. Instead, it focused all of its sharpness on the dragon's head, and the heavenly tribulation sword, which had already taken on the appearance of a dragon pearl, also changed its appearance. Countless sharp auras gathered on its body, and a huge heavenly tribulation sword was held in the mouth of the sword chi dragon. The entire sword hilt was swallowed by the dragon's mouth, leaving only the sword blade outside. It was as if the dragon had spat out the sword blade. Although it was rather complicated, the formation of the heavenly calamity sword was extremely fast. The C2 giant dragon's movement was relatively slow, and it was mainly a long-range ninjutsu. It had already suffered a lot when it brushed past Nangong's sword chi dragon, and now it had to directly collide with Nangong's sword chi dragon? What's more, in the mouth of the sword chi dragon, there was a huge heavenly tribulation sword condensed from sword chi. Without any suspense, the moment the C2 giant dragon came into contact with the sword chi dragon, it was instantly torn apart like a piece of cloth. The huge sword chi dragon directly passed through the C2 giant dragon's body, leaving only a huge hole. Above the hole, there were countless tiny sword chi that were split from the sword chi dragon. Perhaps the explosion of a strand of sword chi was nothing. At most it would cause a little pain. But with so many sword chi strands entangled together, when one of them exploded, it meant that more strands were about to explode. This was not a problem of 1 plus 1. It was an algorithm of mutual multiplication, and the huge power generated by it was displayed in front of Nangongja at this moment. The C2 giant dragon in the sky also exploded at the moment when the sword chi exploded, and a huge fireball appeared in the sky. The original blue sky had become like the setting sun at this moment. The sky was full of bright red clouds, and the blue sword chi was still wandering in it. The red and blue colors were mixed together at this moment. The scene became extraordinarily magnificent. A figure suddenly fell from the explosion of the huge fireball, as if he had suffered a huge injury, and flew towards the ground powerlessly. It was Deidara. Such a huge explosion was also beyond the imagination of the current Deidara, and his body was also seriously injured. Nangongja waved his hand, and the sword chi dragon dissipated in an instant. Borrowing some residual sword chi, Nangongja slowly descended and stood in front of Deidara. But Deidara's eyes were in a daze, and he didn't notice Nangongja at all. Instead, he was like a fanatic, and his eyes were full of a sense of morbid fanaticism. Ahem. This is real art. This kind of explosion is what I want to see. This kind of destructive power, this kind of magical and magnificent color. Sure enough, art is an explosion. Looking at Deidara's appearance of losing his combat power, Nangongja did not continue to move forward, but kept a safe distance from Deidara. With Deidara's strength, who didn't have a few last desperate means? Nangongja didn't know how many times he had suffered from this. The closer he was to the edge of victory, the more cautious he had to be. Deidara's eyes were still full of fanaticism, but when he glanced at Nangongja's face and where he was standing, there was still a hint of disappointment in his eyes. However, Nangongja was cautious, but it didn't mean that others were the same. Fei Duan jumped out directly from his hiding place. He glanced at Nangongja as if he was looking down on Nangongja and said, "This bastard has become like this. Maybe he was blown silly by the explosion. Then why are you standing so far away like a coward? We're in a hurry. If you don't go, then I will." For Fei Duan's words, Nangongja didn't care. Anyway, they probably only cooperated this time. If they met in the future, they might have to fight to the death. Why did Nangongja care about Fei Duan's attitude? He leaned slightly to the side as if he was opening up a path for Fei Duan. At this moment, Fei Duan was very arrogant. He stretched out his hand and combed his extremely smooth swept-back hair. He walked past Nangongja arrogantly and went straight to Fei Duan. Chapter 203. Not only did Haydn walk towards the place where Deidara was lying indifferently, Haydn's walking posture made people want to beat him up when they saw him. He didn't put Deidara in his eyes at all. After all, although Deidara had shown a lot of strength before, he was first suppressed by Conan, then Nangongja, and now he was seriously injured. Haydn felt that Deidara was no longer a threat at this moment. Although Haydn did feel that Deidara couldn't make any waves now, Ninja's instinct still made Haydn take out his black iron rod. The iron rod elongated in an instant, and Haydn directly pierced the iron rod into Deidara's arm. No one could easily ignore such pain, but at this moment, Deidara was still muttering words such as art, explosion, extreme, and so on. Haydn was relieved and walked to Deidara's side. He took out a handcuff inscribed with runes from his arms and prepared to handcuff Daidara's hands. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Daidara, who looked crazy, suddenly performed a very skilled grappling technique. One hand clasped Hayden's hands, and the other hand directly grabbed Hayden's neck. Although I don't know why you came to provoke me, but now your companion is in my hands. The three of you are very similar to the previous group of weaklings, but there are still differences. You must be of the same level. You don't feel distressed about losing weaklings, but losing a ninja of the same level as you, no matter what kind of organization it is, it will definitely be distressed. Daidara said proudly. This time it was like the most inference in his life. You can actually see the difference in status from the difference in clothes. It seems that it is a pity that I, Master Daidara, don't become a detective. You want to kill him to protect yourself? Nangongja looked at Daidara without any worry on his face, but there was an inexplicable excitement. Daidara didn't know why Nangongja had such an expression, but the Haiden in his hand was his only life-saving means. No matter how the opponent hinted that the Haiden was not that valuable, Daidara could only give it a try. It's useless for you to say that to me. I'm not the one in charge. If you want to ask that person. Nangongja said as he raised his chin, making Daidara look at Xiao Nan who had just landed from the sky. Daidara thought that Nangongja was the leader, but since Nangongja said that Xiao Nan was the one in charge, Daidara looked at Xiao Nan. Since you're the one in charge, why don't we make a deal? We have no enmity with each other. It was you who sent people to provoke me first. Now that I'm already in such a miserable state, the deaths of those people who died were worth it. We might as well stop here. You go your way and I go my own way. I will return this fool to you, and you will let me live. We won't see each other again. Isn't that good? Although Daidara spoke heroically, in the end, it was inevitable that there was a hint of begging in it. Hearing Daidara's words, Xiao Nan was completely unmoved. You want to kill him? Then kill him. Anyway, such a fool has no value. Whether you kill him or not, you have to go with us. Xiao Nan's cold words were like a sharp blade piercing Daidara's heart. Although there was no way to immediately verify Xiao Nan's statement, Daidara subconsciously felt that Xiao Nan's words were really from the heart. Whether it was Nangongja or Xiao Nan, they didn't care about Haiden's life. Why? It was obviously the life of someone on the same level as them. This group of people was completely unmoved. What kind of organization is this? They actually treat their own members as child's play? Don't think that I will listen to your nonsense. Since you don't believe in this master's means, then this master will really torture this fool. Listening to Xiao Nan and Daidara calling him a fool, Haiden also began to get angry. I can't afford to offend Xiao Nan, but can't I afford to offend Daidara? Are you King kidding me? Why do you keep calling me an idiot? If you have the ability, then go ahead and kill me. As long as Master Haiden is still alive, this master is your ancestor. Haiden raised his head arrogantly and said to Daidara who was choking him, were these people all crazy? Originally, he thought that he was crazy enough, but this group of people couldn't wait for him to quickly kill Fei Duan, including Fei Duan himself. You all are simply unreasonable. Daidara also felt like a fool being teased by Nangongja, Xiao Nan, and Haiden. You dare to ridicule Master Daidara like this? Do you think your eloquence is very good, and can suppress this master? Since you want this silver-haired fool to die, then this master will fulfill your wish, and must let him die very miserably. Suddenly, a spider made of explosive clay crawled out of Daidara's sleeve. Presumably, when Daidara had killed several ninjas of Akatsuki organization, he had secretly left such a small backup, right? The spider seemed to feel Daidara's anger, and ran into Haiden's mouth very agilely. Unlike the previous Akatsuki's ninjas who immediately exploded after entering Haiden's stomach, this clay spider slowly traveled in Haiden's stomach. Even the place where the clay spider walked left a clay ball about the size of a finger. Such a dense explosion was enough to directly blow Haiden's body into pieces. Watch carefully. Your companions will die with me. Art is explosion. In fact, Deadale also used a lot of determination to launch the explosion. Such a close explosion will definitely affect him. Anyway, this group of people didn't intend to let him go, so he killed one of them first as interest. After that, no matter how they tortured him, it was not a loss. Deadale launched the explosion with such a heart, and a low explosion sound came from Haydn's body. The flesh and blood of Haydn's body were blown to pieces in an instant, and even Deadale was affected by the explosion in Haydn's body. The flame of the explosion also burned directly on Deadale's body. This battle is over. Chapter 204. Looking at the devastated ground and Haydn, who had been blown up with holes all over his body, Conan calmly walked in front of him. She took out a test tube with a green luster from her arms and gently pulled out the oak cork in front of the test tube. Under the guidance of Conan's slightly tilted hand, the liquid began to slowly pour on Haydn's body. The flesh and blood that had been scorched by the high temperature began to gradually fall off under the nourishment of the nutrient solution, revealing some intact flesh and blood hidden in it. Conan waved her hand, and a paper crane flew out from her hand, apparently summoning the ninjas of Akatsuki, who were responsible for the aftermath. This matter has come to an end, and it was very pleasant to cooperate with you. Whether it was out of politeness or sincerity, Conan still stretched out her hand and said to Nangongja with a smile on her face. She had already stretched out her hand, and if he didn't shake it, it would be too impolite. So Nangongja still held Conan's soft and boneless hand in his own hand, and said with a friendly attitude, "You're welcome. It's just a mission to take people's money. Since I'm here, I naturally have to do some things that I should do." Conan looked at Nangongja's appearance, and she also had some plans in her heart. So she asked, "If it's possible, I don't know if you would like to go to Amige Cure's Akatsuki with us? Although I don't know much about your past, when I talk to you, I also know that you were also devastated by war and struggle when you were young. Whether it is Akatsuki or Bloodcloak Pavilion, we all hope that the ninja world can become more beautiful and peaceful. If you are interested, why don't you plan something big with us?" Akatsuki originally had plans to annex Bloodcloak Pavilion. They originally hoped to pull an altar lord from Bloodcloak Pavilion into their camp through this mission. Then they would have more opportunities to absorb such a powerful force as Bloodcloak Pavilion into their organization. Originally, after knowing that Nangongja had become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, there was no chance for him to win over the altar master of the Blood Garment Pavilion to split the Blood Garment Pavilion and then annex it. At that time, Xiao Nan had not figured out how to absorb the Bloodcloak Pavilion. However, that night, when he was drinking with Nangongja on the roof of a house, he heard Nangongja talk about his past. Xiao Nan's heart couldn't help but have such a thought. Since there was no way to divide and absorb Bloodcloak Pavilion, then why not pull Nangongja into Akatsuki? Although Xiao Nan did not know what kind of power Nangongja, who had just taken up the position of Blood Garment Pavilion head, could exert in the Blood Garment Pavilion, at least Nangongja had a righteous reputation. If it was really necessary, Akatsuki could also dispatch its own forces to help Nangongja seize control of Bloodcloak Pavilion. Akatsuki could benefit from it, and Nangongja could also firmly hold Bloodcloak Pavilion in his own hands. Wouldn't it be a win-win situation? Therefore, Xiao Nan had sent an invitation to Nangongja at this time. Planning a big event? Such a word also echoed in Nangongja's mind over and over again. It was true that Nangongja did not really control Bloodcloak Pavilion in his own hands, and even now it was already in a kind of worshipped position. But Nangongja could not make up his mind to cooperate with Akatsuki. Itachi would also give him some information from time to time, from Itachi's description and the performance of Xiao Nan, Fei Duan and others in the battle just now. Nangongja didn't think that Akatsuki organization was an organization that was willing to hide in the dark. There will come a day when they will directly float to the surface, and with that, there will certainly be even more intense bloody rain and foul wind. Nangongja felt in his heart that if he really stood on the united front with Akatsuki, he would be pulled into a bottomless quagmire. There was really no need to accept such an invitation. The risk was hidden in the calm lake, and it was difficult to estimate the size of it. "I'm sorry, Bloodcloak Pavilion is not something that I can wantonly decide alone. There are still lives in it, although I am the head, but I can't treat their lives as a joke. Please allow me to go back and have a good discussion with several altar masters. If there is a result, I will certainly tell you, Xiao Nan. Nangong's words were very polite, but his refusal was very firm, saying that he could not risk the lives of Bloodcloak Pavilion's disciples. Almost all of Xiao Nan's arguments were blocked in her stomach. Because Nangong's words were really not wrong, since he was the head of Akatsuki, he naturally had to regard the safety and development of his organization as the most important thing, and his personal feelings must not be used as a bargaining chip to risk the lives of countless people. Looking at Nangong's appearance, Xiao Nan could not help but think of Yahiko. At that time, Akatsuki had also grown step by step from a small and weak organization to a very high-status organization in the Rain Country. During this process, there were many people who wanted to use various conditions to subdue Akatsuki. But Yahiko was still not moved by such a temptation. Perhaps at that time Yahiko was the same as Nangong's now. He did not only regard himself as an individual, but also as the symbol of an organization. He was his own organization, and he was responsible for every life in the organization. Looking back at the current Akatsuki, did they lose the consciousness that every member of the organization was not someone who could be sacrificed? Xiao Nan did not dare to think about it, because even Xiao Nan was afraid that her organization would change. From the original gathering place of a group of freedom fighters, it had become a tool for revenge. While both of them were full of worries, but on the surface they were still very cordial with each other. The ninjas of Akatsuki who were responsible for the aftermath had already arrived. Xiao Nan-sama. The ninjas did not immediately collect the remains of their companions. Instead, they respectfully saluted Xiao Nan. Xiao Nan deeply looked at the ninjas of Akatsuki, and suddenly her heart was also full of complex feelings. She waved her hand and said with a bit of indifference, "First go collect the corpses of Akatsuki. Exposing them in the wilderness like this, the smell of blood will spread far and wide. Then separate Haydn and the target's body, and give both of them emergency treatment. After returning to the base, I will let specialized people treat them. Go." The ninjas of Akatsuki lowered their head and said, "Yes," and then dispersed to clean up the battlefield, erasing some traces that would expose Akatsuki. Chapter 205. Nangongja was still wearing the same plain-colored robe that he wore when he first came to the Earth Country, and the wide hood hid his face. The wind was still blowing some dust on the road. Everything was the same as when Nangongja first arrived in the Earth Country. After saying goodbye to Conan, Nangongja also walked alone towards the location of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. As for the Akatsuki's uniform, he naturally returned it to Conan. Just when Nangongja was walking at an ordinary speed on the road, Nangongja suddenly heard the sound of air being cut. Hidden weapon. Although Nangongja didn't know who attacked him from behind, but Nangongja still instinctively stretched out his hand and caught the hidden weapon that was flying towards him. The style of the hidden weapon was very strange. It was a special kunai. The original kunai should only have 1 point, but the one in Nangongja's hand had 3 points. The handle of the kunai was also thicker than the ordinary kunai, and there were several runes engraved on the handle. Flying Thunder God Jutsu's special kunai? When Nangongja saw it for the first time, he already recognized the special kunai. Impressively, it was the 4th Hokage who went to the shinobi world to find the person behind the attack on the Woodleaf Minato Watergate. Just when Nangongja was still wondering whether Watergate was here or not, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. There was no trace of him, but there was a very obscure spatial fluctuation. If Nangongja hadn't used the Lion Clan space formation many times, it would be difficult to detect the spatial fluctuation. Ha! The figure that suddenly appeared didn't speak. He just pressed a ball of chakra shining with blue light in his hand towards Nangongja. Nangongja also reacted quickly, and directly threw the special kunai in his hand to the side. The Heaven's Disaster Sword behind him instantly came out of its scabbard and slashed towards the chakra at an extremely fast speed. The internal force attached to the Heaven's Disaster Sword, relying on the characteristics of the internal force, the Rasengan was instantly cut in two. The Rasengan itself was in an unstable structure. When Nangongja violently cut it in two, the balance of the chakra was destroyed in an instant. Boom! The sound of the explosion sounded, and the figure that attacked Nangongja had already reached the position of the kunai thrown by Nangongja in an instant, out of the explosion range. Watergate! Wait, it's me, Nangongja. When the figure just stood still and picked up the special kunai under his feet, and was ready to continue the attack, Nangongja took off the wide hood on his head, letting the figure that attacked him see his face clearly. Sure enough, the figure that attacked Nangongja was also standing in the same place at the moment. Nangongja finally had the opportunity to observe the appearance of the person who attacked him. The blonde hair and the forehead protector on his forehead instantly proved the identity of the person who attacked him. He was wearing a white flame-lined haori, and on the back of the haori written in big letters, "It's Shinakushina's husband, Naruto's father, and the fourth Hokage who once fought together with him, Watergate Namikaze, Nangongja." Watergate said suspiciously to Nangongja, "Yes, it's me. I didn't expect that after such a long time, we would have to fight when we meet again. It's really a strange greeting." Nangongja put the sword in his hand back into the scabbard on his back, apparently to prove that he wasn't hostile. Watergate also put away the kunai in his hand, and after confirming the identity of Nangongja, he also walked to Nangongja's side and said with a little apology, "I'm sorry. I thought you were from the organization I have been chasing. I just received the information that they appeared in the land of Earth, and on the way here I suddenly saw you wrapped up so tightly, and I thought you might have some connection with them, so I attacked you." Watergate scratched his cheek a little awkwardly. Apparently he felt very guilty for attacking Nangongja. Watergate has been chasing the dangerous organization in the shinobi world for the past few years, and after living in the open, Watergate's face has become a little bit weary. Obviously, he has suffered a lot over the years. "It's nothing. I know how you feel about that organization." Because of such an organization, Watergate had to let his child become a human column force. And because of this organization, Watergate's wife Shinakushina's life was hanging by a thread for a long time. Watergate has been chasing this organization for so long, but he rarely found any information about this organization. This time, he finally found some information about this organization, so it's understandable that he became a little anxious. However, Nangongja's words stopped halfway. Land of Earth? Activity information? Powerful organization? All of this. Watergate, can I ask you a question? Nangongja asked tentatively. Watergate was also a little confused by Nangongja's sudden question. Just as he was about to open his mouth to answer Nangongja's question, Nangongja said as if he was answering his own question, "Is this organization the Akatsuki?" Watergate's originally very kind eyes became sharp the moment Nangongja said the name. Where did you know the name of this organization? Tell me. Please tell me everything you know about this organization," Watergate said, but his hands were pressed on Nangongja's shoulders. The strength of his hands also proved that Watergate's heart was not calm at the moment. Is it really the Akatsuki? In fact, there are very few powerful people in the ninja world. In addition to the 5 great ninja villages that can control the power of the Nine Tails, to be honest, Nangongja may only know about the Akatsuki. However, Nangongja only reacted now after realizing it. This is really... Watergate, don't be excited. I will tell you. Nangongja said such a sentence to Watergate. Perhaps Watergate has really faced too much pressure in these years. Such an organization that has its eyes on the Nine Tails, isn't it putting a sharp knife on the neck of his wife and child? Watergate has been tracking down everything about the Akatsuki for years, even if he doesn't know how to make wood leaf, because he wants his wife and child to live safely. Many people say that a woman is weak, but a mother is strong. But as a father, Watergate also has the same feeling. As long as he can protect his wife and child, Watergate will do anything. Chapter 206. In fact, everything is very coincidental. The reason why I know about the Akatsuki is because Jiraiya-sama took me to Mount Mayaboku. Watergate, do you know about the Great Toad Sage's prophecy? Nangongja saw that Watergate had calmed down, so he pulled Watergate to a big tree on the side of the road and slowly sat down on the ground. But Watergate didn't have the mood to sit down and rest at all, he just stood there. You mean the child of prophecy? As Jiraiya's disciple, Watergate knew more than Nangongja, not less than Nangongja. Yes, Jiraiya's disciple will become the savior of the shinobi world. Although Jiraiya-sama only has you as his disciple, Watergate, in fact, when he was young, he taught 3 children in the Rain Country. Although they didn't formally become his disciple, they already had a master-disciple relationship. So, I also investigated all the information about them. Some of the information about the so-called Akatsuki. Although it was only a few words, it still brought a lot of shock to Watergate. The people behind the scenes who have been threatening his wife and children's lives turned out to be his fellow disciples? Yahiko, Konan, Nagato. But why would they do such a thing? Obviously, Minato knew that these 3 children had been taught by his master, Jiraiya. But Watergate was still very puzzled, and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. In the beginning, Akatsuki was a very pure organization. They were mainly formed to fight against the brutal rule of Hanzo the Salamander, the leader of the Rain Village. They were similar to freedom fighters who gathered together to fight against Hanzo the Salamander. But it seems that once again they were ambushed, and their leader, Yahiko, who was one of Jiraiya-sama's disciples, also died at that time. After that, the Akatsuki began to turn from light to dark, and gradually lurked in the shadows. Little by little, he became the real ruler of Amigakure. Moreover, according to some unconfirmed information, at that time, the ambush of the Akatsuki was not only Hanzo the Salamander's men, but also the Woodleaf ninjas led by Danzo. Woodleaf ninjas are also involved? They are all my senior and junior brothers. Naturally, I can use some peaceful means to resolve the conflict. How did things end up like this? Watergate also seemed to find it hard to accept. After all, whether it was Yahiko, Konan, or Nagato, they were all his fellow disciples. And with his master Jiraiya, would Leaf Village actually directly participated in the operation to exterminate them? That was really too immoral. I didn't expect them to be the force you've been chasing. But since you said that they were recently active in the Earth Country, and their strength is also very strong, I couldn't help but connect them. Nangongja also felt that he was a little slow to connect the dots after such a long time. However, wasn't it the same for the Watergate in front of him? Who would have thought that a few children who struggled to survive in the country of rain would be able to establish such a huge organization with their own efforts? Anyone would overlook such a simple fact. It seems that it's time to go back to Woodleaf. About the Akatsuki, it's necessary to let 3 generations and sensei know. Watergate thought for a long time and finally made up his mind. These things are no longer his personal affairs, but also related to the Hokage clan. Jiraiya and 3 generations have the right to know such things. But, Nangongja, how did you know about the Akatsuki's activities in the Earth Country? It's even more detailed than my informant. Nangongja also briefly repeated his conflict with Danzo when he was in Woodleaf to Watergate. Danzo again? You're really a restless person, so because you had such a conflict with Danzo, you directly left Woodleaf in a fit of anger. You're doing this in the ninja world, but you received a mission from the Akatsuki and came to complete it? Nangongja didn't tell Watergate that he became the leader of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. After all, he still had the title of a Woodleaf ninja. You, a Woodleaf ninja, actually went out to be the leader of another independent force? What do you mean? Just think about it and know how big the turmoil will be after such a thing is revealed. So Nangongja still covered up these things. You're still too impulsive. Although I'm not in Woodleaf, Sandaime is temporarily acting as the Hokage. If you are wronged, there will naturally be 3 generations to redress your grievances. It's too childish of you to leave in a fit of anger. Why don't you go back to Woodleaf with me? Many of your friends also live in Woodleaf. It's been so long, so it's only right to go back and see them. Moreover, Shinakushina also mentioned in her letters that you helped her and her son a lot. Come back with me so that I can thank you together with the mother and son. When he was chasing those ninjas who attacked Woodleaf, he didn't have such a strong idea of going back to see his child. But when he suddenly decided to go back to the village, this feeling became so strong in an instant. Whether it was his child's cute appearance or his wife's voice and appearance, Watergate yearned for it so much. This Nangongzhe was actually a little hesitant because he didn't plan to go back to Woodleaf at all. This time, if he went back to Woodleaf, he didn't know how many plans would be delayed. But looking at Watergate, who was very excited in front of him, Nangongzhe secretly shook his head. Presumably, with Watergate's temperament, he would directly drag him back to Woodleaf. 3 generations to redress his grievances? For generations to vouch for him? Really, Nangongzhe didn't know whether to laugh or cry in his heart. Because in Nangongzhe's heart, 3 generations weren't that kind of people. And at this moment, in front of him, it seemed like Watergate was revealing his true feelings, and there was nothing strange about it. How can a ninja lack the proper calculation? His own strength, his own value, these are the reasons why Watergate pulled him back to Woodleaf. But at this time, if he refused Watergate's proposal, it would not be easy to directly fall out with Woodleaf. The conflict between him and Danzo is a small matter that can be solved. But do you dare to not give him face? That's no different from slapping Woodleaf's face. Chapter 207. Although Nangongzhe didn't plan to return to Woodleaf, in the face of Watergate, Nangongzhe still had to consider the possible situation after rejecting Watergate. Therefore, although it wasn't out of his own intention, Nangongzhe still decided to go back to Woodleaf with Watergate. Of course, whether it was Little Linger, Mashiro, or Nangongro, they couldn't go back. As long as Danzo was still in Woodleaf, Nangongzhe wasn't sure if more sinister means would be used on his family. Only in this kind of thing, Nangongzhe wasn't willing to let his family face the slightest risk. Nangongzhe and Watergate walked together in the direction of Woodleaf. By the way, Watergate, since you have such a convenient ninjutsu like Flying Thunder God, why don't you go back to Woodleaf to see your wife and children more often? Since he wanted to go back to Woodleaf with Watergate, naturally, the two of them couldn't just rush back like this. A little chat was also a good thing, wasn't it? Flying Thunder God. This ninjutsu is actually not so simple and easy to use. Watergate knew that there were very few people who practiced spatial ninjutsu in the ninja world, so after Nangongzhe asked such a question, Watergate said with a slight sigh, if Flying Thunder God is used in a small area, naturally the consumption is relatively small. For someone like me, even if I use chakra more than 20 times in a row, it will only make my body a little tired. But when the distance of movement exceeds a certain limit, whether it's the consumption of chakra or my physical strength, it will increase exponentially. Like now, we are in the hinterland of the Earth Country, not to mention using Flying Thunder God to reach the border of the Fire Country. Even from here to the border of the Earth Country, I will be directly submerged in the cracks of space because of the problem of physical strength and chakra. Of course, what Watergate didn't say was that as long as he had enough space coordinates, he could teleport in the largest range he could. After the teleportation, if he had a good rest, he would be able to reach Woodleaf Village smoothly. But Watergate forced himself not to go back to Woodleaf so easily. Even if he didn't have a fierce quarrel with the 3 generations, Watergate must leave Woodleaf to find the organization that attacked Woodleaf. All of this was to protect his wife and children. If he went back to Woodleaf so easily, it would not only wear down his determination, but it would also make Watergate fall into a deep self-condemnation. Watergate knew that if he went to Woodleaf, he would be reluctant to let go of the time he lived with his wife and children. Not to mention looking for the organization that attacked Woodleaf, maybe even his skills would be slightly reduced due to many reasons. Nangongzhe himself didn't like to talk to people. Although Watergate was very cheerful, his whole heart was worried about his wife and children, and he didn't have the mood to continue chatting with Nangongzhe. Both of them were very good ninjas. Even if they were rushing, their speed was extremely fast. After about half a month, Nangongzhe and Watergate had already arrived near Woodleaf Village. Although it had been a long time, Woodleaf was still the same. It looked very huge with vermilion paint on it. It was noon now, Woodleaf's door was wide open, and through the door, they could already see the tall Hokage office and the Shadow Rock behind it. It's been a long time since I came back. Woodleaf really hasn't changed at all. Watergate seemed to be very emotional. After all, he hadn't come back for a long time. Just as they were about to step into Woodleaf, the guards at the Wood Leaf Gate stopped Watergate and Nangongja. Sorry, if you want to enter Wood Leaf, please show your identity card. A ninja with a bandage on his face said to Nangongja and Watergate. Even the entrance has been changed? The gatekeeper was no longer someone he was familiar with. Suddenly, Minato had a feeling that things were still the same, but people had changed. Was his decision to leave Wood Leaf right or wrong? How many important things did he miss in the years he was away? Watergate didn't dare to think about it because the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his decision was too hasty. From his arms, he took out the forehead protector that he hadn't worn for a long time and put it on the table in front of Nangongja. I'm a ninja from Wood Leaf. Now I'm back from a mission. When Nangongja saw the forehead protector, he also looked up at Watergate. As the gate protector, Nangongja carefully looked at Watergate. The more he looked at him, the more he felt that he had seen this person before. Sorry, I don't know your name? Out of his duty, Nangongja still asked for Watergate's name. I'm a ninja from Wood Leaf, Minafe Watergate. Minafe. Listening to Watergate say his name, Nangongja also took a pen and wrote Watergate's name on the entry and exit registration form. As soon as he wrote Watergate's surname, Nangongja already knew who the person standing in front of him was. You are the fourth Hokage? It's been a long time since there was any news about the fourth Hokage, Minafe Watergate, but the story about Watergate has never been not mentioned. This is the most proud ninja of Wood Leaf. I'll go inform Sandaime. Nangongja hurriedly got up and wanted to report the news of Watergate's return to 3 generations, but Watergate pressed Nangongja back to his seat and said to him with a smile, "It's okay. You can stay here and do your job well. As for the 3rd generation, I will personally meet him. Since it's your request, then there's no problem." After all, Nangongja is just a chunin, and it's his duty to inform 3 generations. Since Watergate doesn't want him to go, then there's nothing wrong with it. Nangongja just looked at the intimate interaction between Nangongja and Watergate and didn't do anything. Nangongja's impression of Wood Leaf has dropped to the freezing point, and such an intimate performance between ninjas, Nangongja can't stand it at all. Then, this is my ID. Nangongja just took out his forehead protector with a little coldness and handed it to Nangongja. Since you were brought back by the 4th Hokage, there's no need to check it. Just tell me your name, and I'll record it for you. Nangongja said very kindly to Nangongja. Nangongja. The brush in Nangongja's hand shook slightly, and a drop of ink fell on the record book. But soon, Gang Zite recorded Nangongja's name on the entry record. Chapter 208. Naruto. Stop. Just when Nangongja and Watergate were still registering information at the Wood Leaf Gate, a loud roar came into their ears. Naruto. This name is still very obscure. If I'm not mistaken, only Watergate's child has such a big name. A small figure jumped on the roofs on both sides of the Wood Leaf Street, and another figure has been chasing Naruto. At this moment, Naruto's face was full of excitement, as if he had done something amazing. Looking at the figure chasing after him, Naruto turned around as if he was mocking him. He made a face and said to the person behind him, "Ha ha ha, Iruka-sensei, my masterpiece is so beautiful. Why do you keep chasing me? Do you want me to draw a beautiful mural for your house?" The figure chasing Naruto is naturally Naruto's class teacher, Ko Iruka. "You actually painted graffiti in the school. If I don't take you back and punish you severely, I will not let you go." Yes, Naruto took paint and painted graffiti in the classroom of the ninja school. Naruto's abstract style of graffiti, Iruka's nose was crooked after seeing it, because he was abstractly painted in the classroom by Naruto. Iruka can already imagine that every time he has a class in the future, the students in his class will involuntarily think of his demonic face. This time, I must punish this stinky kid well and let him know how powerful I am. Iruka thought so in his heart. It seems, your child is really energetic? Although Nangongja didn't graduate from the ninja school like Shinakushina and Watergate, but Watergate's style of being a top student in the ninja school is still heard a little bit. Now that his child is so naughty, It's very interesting. This kid. Watergate's mouth slightly muttered, and he has already cast the body flicker technique. Just when Naruto was still making funny faces with Iruka, Watergate had already appeared behind Naruto. He skillfully grabbed Naruto directly in his hand. Iruka was also shocked. If you want to use the body flicker technique, you must have the strength of a jonin. When did Naruto provoke such a person? But when Iruka saw Watergate's face, such worries quickly disappeared. You? Iruka just wanted to say something, but Watergate shook his head and stopped Iruka. Instead, he once again used the body flicker technique and appeared next to Nangongja. Ah, who are you? Why are you grabbing me? I want to. Naruto was caught in Watergate's hand, but his face was facing the front, and he couldn't see Watergate's face at all. But Nangongja was standing opposite Watergate. Naruto recognized Nangongja at a glance. Uncle Nangong? Ah, Uncle Nangong, you are back. Mom told me that you left the village for something. Why did you leave for so long? Help me catch this bad guy for me. Bad guy? Is it really good to talk about your father like that? As for Watergate, who was holding Naruto, his face has turned green at the moment. The Flying Thunder God technique was immediately cast. Whether it was Naruto or Watergate, their figures disappeared in an instant. Although Watergate didn't tell him where he went, he probably went to see his wife, right? The two hadn't seen each other for so long. Nangongja didn't want to disturb the warmth between the two couples who hadn't seen each other for a long time. He shook his head indifferently, took the forehead protector handed to him by Zitai, and walked in the direction of his home. Let me go! Let me go! Naruto shouted. But as soon as the Flying Thunder God was cast, the two appeared at the door of Watergate's house in an instant. He actually arrived at his home. Naruto's shouting stopped in an instant. What a joke with his mother's character. Once she knew that he got into trouble, wouldn't her life be in danger? What are you doing? Are you going to complain to my mother? No. My mother is so scary. After all, he had the temperament of a child. Naruto gave in an instant. However, the powerful ninja who caught him didn't seem to listen to his words. He just went to the door of his house. Step by step, he walked to the doorbell. Then, he stretched out his hand and pressed the doorbell of his house. He's here. Is Naruto back? You brat, did you skip class again? Let's see if I don't teach you a lesson. Shinakushina's voice came from inside the house. In an instant, Watergate only felt that his eyes were covered with mist. His wife and child were in front of him, but he had never fulfilled his responsibility as a husband and a father. Creak! The door was opened, and Kushina's face was filled with anger. She even had a frying pan in her hand. Obviously, he wasn't joking when he said that he wanted to teach Naruto a lesson. Shinakushina? Watergate opened his mouth and gently called out his wife's name. Shinakushina, who opened the door, also had a look of disbelief. A drop of tear quietly fell from Shinakushina's face. You're back? With both hands covering her cheeks, Shinakushina's heart was filled with fear at this moment. She was afraid that everything that happened now was a dream, and all of this was her imagination. Watergate slowly put down Naruto in his hand. Just looking at Shinakushina like this, he couldn't stop the tears in his eyes. I'm back. Slowly opening his arms, Watergate looked at Shinakushina, waiting for Shinakushina to rush into his arms. Shinakushina took a few steps forward, but directly slapped Watergate in the face. You still know that you're back? You still know that you have a wife? You still know that you have a child? How can you? Maybe it was the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time that suddenly broke out? Shinakushina clearly slapped Watergate, but she cried even harder. Watergate didn't care that his face was red from Shinakushina's slap. He just held Shinakushina in his arms. I'm back. Only Naruto still had a blank look on his face, but he looked at the open door of his house. A person who looked very similar to the blonde man in front of him was holding his mother in his arms with a smile on his face. This is my parents' wedding photo. Is this man my father? Chapter 209. After a long time, Watergate and Shinakushina finally adjusted their mood and let go of each other's bodies. Shinakushina's eyes were still a little red because of tears. She stretched out her hand to wipe away the remaining tears in the corner of her eyes. She tidied up her hair that had become a little messy because of her emotions just now. Shinakushina tried to put a smile on her face. She squatted down and touched Naruto's cheek with her hand. "Naruto, this is your father, he's back." Shinakushina's tone was very gentle. Her hand was as careful as if she was stroking a fragile porcelain. Naruto looked at Watergate, who was standing in front of him. His eyes were a little dazed. This was the almost perfect father that everyone talked about. For many people, Watergate was the savior of Woodleaf. Watergate was the most outstanding ninja of Woodleaf's younger generation. But Naruto didn't feel that kind of glory. Since this person was so excellent, since this person was so perfect, why did he abandon his wife and children and leave Woodleaf? She had never seen such a person in her childhood. He only remembered that his mother woke up early and went to sleep late every day to take care of him. When he was injured, it was his mother who was sad and angry to bandage his wounds. When he was naughty, it was his mother who scolded him, but she also personally apologized to others for the wrong things he had done. There were many times, things that should have been done by his father were often done by his mother alone. Even when he was young, it was Nangongja who taught him the truth and trained his skills. In Naruto's heart, perhaps Nangongja was more in line with the image of his father in Naruto's mind. Naruto vaguely remembered that when he came back from Nangongja's house, he even asked his mother very childishly why Uncle Nangong wasn't his father, because only Uncle Nangong had been protecting them. At that time, Shinakushina was very angry and directly slapped Naruto. But when Shinakushina slapped him, she hugged herself and cried bitterly. Naruto saw his strong and gentle mother crying more than once. At this time, where was his father, who was called perfect by others? Naruto didn't know the truth, but a man who abandoned his wife and children and left home for many years wanted to be a qualified husband and a competent father? Sorry, even if Naruto was young, he couldn't accept it. Naruto reached out his hand, grabbed Shinakushina's wrist, and gently moved Shinakushina's hand away from his face. Such a person, how can he be my father? Naruto looked at Watergate coldly, and the coldness made Watergate's heart tingle faintly. When Watergate stood in front of the door, he heard Shinakushina's voice. Although it was only a short moment, Watergate had already decided that he must compensate his wife and child well. At this time, Naruto's words made Watergate's originally fiery heart turn into an ice field, and the wind was bone-chilling. How can he be Naruto's father? How can he be Shinakushina's husband? Watergate's heart also questioned himself in the same way as Naruto's question. Shinakushina looked at Naruto, and the tears that had disappeared from her eyes reappeared. Naruto, do you know what you are saying? Shinakushina really wanted to slap Naruto hard and tell him that what he said was wrong, and that Watergate was the most qualified father. But Shinakushina couldn't open her mouth to say such words, and could only stare at Naruto. I know very well. Naruto glanced at Watergate, turned his head, and ran out of his yard. Looking at Naruto's leaving figure, Watergate was about to chase after him, but Shinakushina grabbed Watergate's hand. Shinakushina shook her head gently and said to Watergate, Naruto is a child after all. When you weren't at Woodleaf, Naruto had been laughed at by many children of his age. Many children don't know what's important and say a lot of hurtful things. Let him calm down. He will know your difficulties. Since Shinakushina, who knew Naruto the best, said so, Watergate didn't know what to say, because looking at Naruto's rejection of him, even if he really caught up with Naruto, what kind of conversation could they have? Holding Watergate's arm, Shinakushina pulled Watergate into her home. Nangongja looked at the familiar courtyard door of his home, and for a moment, his mind drifted back to the carefree 3 years. He taught some children at the ninja school, Mashiro helped at the Mayabuki family's clothing store, Nangong Ro worked at the Kiba hospital, and Little Linger studied at the ninja school. From time to time, Sakura and Naruto would come to his home to ask for his advice. At that time, this courtyard would be filled with laughter every day. But now, Whether it's people or laughter, it's gone forever. He reached out his hand and gently stroked the door of his courtyard. Whether it's the paint on the door or the slightly rusty door knocker, their lines seem so familiar. Little Zhe? Nangongzhe suddenly heard a familiar voice behind him. When he turned around, he saw a woman with long cherry-colored hair pulling a little girl with the same cherry-colored hair behind him. Her tone was a little surprised and full of nostalgia. "Yabuki, you're here." Nangongzhe smiled. The person who came was naturally my Yabuki, an old acquaintance he got to know when he came to Woodleaf. Sakura saw Nangongzhe and was very happy. She went up and hugged Nangongzhe's waist. She looked up at Nangongzhe and said, "Uncle Nangong, you're back." Mom told Sakura that Uncle Nangong went out of the village to carry out a mission. Is it fun outside the village? Is there anything that's very impressive? Where are Sister Rower and Sister Mashiro? Oh right, where is Sister Linger? The little girl opened her mouth and shot out questions one by one like a machine gun. Nangongzhe touched Sakura's hair and said with a smile, "That's when you're a human. The outside of the village is very interesting. Uncle came back after he finished his work. Your sisters didn't come back because they had something to do. Let Uncle tell you about the outside of the village. Okay? Children always look forward to things they haven't seen before. Especially Sakura, who lived in Woodleaf since she was young and almost never went out." Sakura agreed with a happy face. She seemed to be looking forward to stories from outside the village. Chapter 210. Nangongzhe took out a blanket from the house and gently covered the sleeping Sakura with the blanket. Sakura was young and was at the age where she was fond of sleeping. Nangongzhe told her about some of the things that happened outside the village, which made the little girl jump up and down in excitement. But after jumping up and down, she was very tired and fell asleep on her mother's lap. "Thank you, Yabuki, for coming over to help me clean up the house when I left. Otherwise, I was really worried that no one could live in the house." Nangongzhe looked at the person who had always taken care of him like a sister and smiled. "It's nothing, it's just a small matter. You suddenly disappeared without a trace. You gave me a fright. I was worried about your safety for a few days. You're like my own brother. I'm also very concerned about your safety." Yichue looked at Nangongzhe and seemed to be a little angry that Nangongzhe left without saying goodbye. "Later, my husband told me that you're also a strong person. Even if something happens, you can protect yourself. I finally let go of my hanging heart. But I thought that you might come back at any time, but you don't even have a place to stay. So I came over to help you clean up occasionally when I'm free. This is nothing." He had already left Woodleaf, but there were still people who were thinking about him. This kind of feeling really made Nangongzhe feel a little warm in his heart. "Can I ask you what made you leave Woodleaf without any warning?" Yichue was actually very worried about Nangongzhe, so she hesitated for a while before asking. Nangongzhe was a little embarrassed because Danzo's question was indeed very sensitive. Nangongzhe was not sure if he would implicate Yichue if he told her the truth. However, Ye's worries were real. Nangongzhe still felt that he should let you know a little more. "Actually, it's nothing much. It's just that some of the higher-ups in Woodleaf want to force me to do something I don't want to do. I couldn't afford to offend them, but I could still hide. So, I took Ruru and the others and left Woodleaf for the time being. Actually, it was a coincidence that I came back to the Woodleaf. I happened to run into Watergate, who was going back to the Woodleaf, so I came back with him to take a look and talk about the situation." When Yichue heard that it was because of the dirty dealings of the higher-ups, a look of understanding appeared on her face. In fact, Konoha's high-level officials had a lot of shady things circulating in the streets. In fact, everyone was well aware of it. Nangongzhe put such a big black pot on the heads of Konoha's high-level officials. There was really no flaw. Anyway, Danzo himself was also a member of Woodleaf's higher-ups. Letting Woodleaf's higher-ups take the blame together wasn't a loss, right? Just as Nangongzhe was about to continue chatting with Yichue, Nangongzhe sensed that there seemed to be some movement in front of his house. "Yabuki, I didn't think that someone would come just as I came back to Woodleaf. I'll go take a look." Yichue nodded and signaled Nangongzhe to do as he pleased. Standing up, Nangongja held the god's retribution sword in his hand and slowly walked to the front of his house. Creak! As Nangongja exerted force in his hand, the door slowly opened. Looking straight ahead, there was no one in sight. Nangongja looked down again and found that Naruto was standing in front of his house. His eyes were red and tears kept flowing out of his eyes. Nangongja's hand that was tightly holding the god's retribution sword also slowly loosened. Nangongja gently squatted down and pulled Naruto's small hand and asked, "Why are you here? Daddy finally came back. Why don't you stay with your daddy?" When Naruto heard Nangongja's words, the tears in his eyes stopped. However, he lowered his head and looked at his feet without saying a word. A gust of wind blew, bringing a bit of coldness. Nangongja knew that he couldn't always let Naruto stand in front of his house, so he stood up and pulled Naruto into the house. "It's cold outside. Let's talk inside." Naruto nodded and followed Nangongja. When they entered the living room, they saw Yuchue sitting inside and Sakura sleeping soundly on her lap. "Naruto, what's wrong? You look like you've been crying?" Yuchue and Shinakushina could be said to be living in two completely different classes. If not for Nangongja's existence, perhaps the two of them might not even know each other. However, Naruto and Sakura had received training from Nangongja since they were young. Even their mothers had unknowingly become good friends with each other. So when she saw Naruto's abnormal appearance, Yuchue asked. However, Naruto still lowered his head and didn't say a word. Yuchue couldn't help but look at Nangongja, obviously hoping that Nangongja would give her an explanation. "Watergate is back." When Nangongja said the two words Watergate, Nangongja clearly felt the small hand that he was holding tremble slightly. When he was chatting with Yuchue just now, Nangongja had already told her about the news of Watergate's return. However, Yuchue didn't immediately connect it to Naruto. Nangongja reminded Yuchue, so she naturally understood. A father that she had never met, a stranger that was closest to her. This kind of thing happened to such a young child. It was no wonder that the usually cheerful Naruto was silent. Gently moving Sakura's head away, Yuchue walked to Naruto's side. She squatted down and hugged Naruto in her arms. Obviously, she didn't say a word, but Naruto's tears flowed out again. The crying was so loud that even the sleeping Sakura was awakened by Naruto's crying. Sakura, who usually had a bad temper, looked at Naruto who was crying in her mother's arms. But it was rare that she didn't lose her temper. She just quietly looked at her mother and Naruto. Nangongja didn't expect that Watergate's return would have such a big impact on Naruto, but thinking about it carefully, he watched Naruto grow up. During the time he taught him, Naruto never once asked him about his father. It was as if he took the initiative to ignore the existence of such a person. The knot in his heart had been formed a long time ago. However, these things were Watergate and Shinakushina's family matters. No matter how much he pitied Naruto, these things must be resolved. However, looking at the sky that had become a little dark outside, Nangongja was worried about letting Naruto go back. Why not let him stay here for a night? Chapter 211. When Naruto opened his eyes, he was stunned for a few seconds. He finally realized that he seemed to have stayed at Nangongja's house last night. Wearing pajamas that were not very suitable, Naruto walked into the living room with slippers. The aroma of food had already floated into Naruto's nose. "Oh, you're up." Nangongja walked in front of Naruto with a plate. He led Naruto to the front of the table and put the plate in his hand in front of Naruto. There was a somewhat simple breakfast on the plate, a fried egg and a few strips of bacon. "I don't know how to cook, so I barely made some food. Why don't you try it?" Nangongja smiled and said to Naruto. Naruto nodded, took the chopsticks in Nangongja's hand, and ate breakfast. "How is it? You're not at odds, right?" Looking at Naruto, Nangongja asked. Nangongja's question made Naruto a little embarrassed. Nangongja reached out and put his hand on Naruto's head. He gently rubbed Naruto's slightly fluffy hair and said slowly, "I know that your father's sudden return made you feel a little overwhelmed. This is normal. Although you are father and son, you almost never lived together. Such an intimate stranger suddenly appeared. It is indeed difficult to accept. However, half of your blood also belongs to him flowing in your body. But he, Naruto said hesitantly, as if he wanted to find a reasonable explanation for his behavior. But Nangongja's eyes quietly looked at Naruto, and a pile of excuses for himself could not continue. Do you still remember when you were young? You told me about your own ninja path? Thinking back, when Nangongja asked Naruto and Sakura about his ninja path, Nangongja was shocked by Naruto's answer, so Nangongja couldn't help but ask this question to Naruto again. Naruto slowly raised his head, and his eyes became brighter. If you have something to say, just say it. Yes, just say it if you have something to say. In this world, there are actually very few people who can do such a simple act of just say it. Because people always involuntarily avoid some things that they don't want to face, just like your attitude toward your father now. However, avoidance is always the most cowardly choice. Since you have decided to say it, then face it properly. Maybe you think that Watergate is not so competent as a father, but you can't deprive him of the opportunity to prove himself, right? Give him a chance. Let him prove to you and your mother that he can be a qualified father and a qualified husband. Okay. In fact, what children hated most was others treating them as if they didn't understand anything. When others treated them as if they were children, no matter how reasonable the words were, it was difficult to listen to them. But Nangongja at this moment put Naruto in the position of a person who could think independently and talk to Naruto seriously. There was no need for any persuasion. Nangongja just needed to let Naruto see clearly how he should face it. I know I will talk to him properly. Perhaps it was because of his trust in Nangongja. Naruto listened to Nangongja's words very seriously. These were indeed things that he should face. There was no point in blindly avoiding and blindly rejecting them, right? Very good. This is the disciple that I, Nangongja, taught. I have already informed Shinakushina. She will come to pick you up soon. I believe that Naruto will do what you should do. Nangongja smiled and said to Naruto. Naruto also smiled at Nangongja, then lowered his head and continued to eat the breakfast that Nangongja made. After eating for a while, the figure of Shinakushina had already appeared in front of Nangongja's house. Perhaps in order to make Naruto not so repulsive, Watergate did not come. I really disturbed you. You just came back and Naruto came to disturb you for so long. When she saw Nangongja, Shinakushina said very apologetically, "It's okay. Naruto himself has been taught by me. He is also considered half of my disciple. It is right to take care of him. I have just had a good talk with Naruto. He has decided to face Watergate properly. You don't have to say anything about him. I believe that Naruto can think clearly by himself." Nangongja also told Shinakushina about the things that he had just talked with Naruto. Nangongja was still confident in Naruto. That's naturally better. This child has been very stubborn since he was a child. Other than me, you are the only one who can listen to your words. This time, it would be best if you could persuade him properly. Watergate has just returned to Woodleaf. There are still many things. I also hope that he cannot spend too much energy on his family. Although it was not very clear, it was obvious that Watergate had a little trouble with the higher-ups of Woodleaf. As Hokage, he left Woodleaf to find a terrorist organization. It would indeed make the higher-ups of Woodleaf complain. After Watergate left, there were still 3 generations to suppress the group of old men and women, but since Watergate came back, he naturally had to take back the power that should have belonged to him, which would cause a lot of trouble. I know, Watergate is probably worried now. But no matter what, family is always more important than any power. Please pass my words to Watergate. I have seen too many people break up their families because of their greed for power. This is a lesson from the past. I hope you can take it to heart. When Nangongja said this, he couldn't help but think of the Uchiha Fugaku couple who were still living in the Lion Clan's different space. Nangongja's words were not pleasant to hear, but Shinakushina knew that Nangongja had no malice, so she also nodded to indicate that she heard. As for whether she took these words to heart, only Shinakushina herself knew. Nangongja slightly moved his body, allowing Shinakushina to enter the room. Within a few minutes, Naruto had been pulled out by Shinakushina. Although Naruto's face was still not very good, he had obviously decided to face everything that he should face. Then, goodbye. Pulling Naruto, Shinakushina slightly saluted. Be careful on the road. Nangongja also saluted back. Chapter 212. After sending off Shinakushina and her son, Nangongja closed the door of his house and left with the Heaven's Disaster Sword. It was early in the morning, about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. There weren't many people on the streets of Woodleaf, and even the air was a little bit cool. There was also some dew on the grass and trees on the roadside that hadn't been completely dispersed. From time to time, the dew fell from the leaves of the grass and trees to the ground, making some of the dry soil feel a little bit moist. Nangongja wasn't just taking a casual walk, but walking towards the original Uchiha clan land. The Uchiha clan forcibly occupied a large piece of land in Woodleaf as their own clan land. Except for the Uchiha clan members, even the direct subordinates of the Hokage had no right to enter the land of the Uchiha clan without permission. However, after experiencing the night of the extermination of the Uchiha clan, there was no longer a scene of patrolling Uchiha clan. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of desolation. For people, a place where a lot of people died was a dangerous place, and no one would be interested in it. So even if this place was out of the control of the Uchiha clan, no one came to discuss the acquisition of this land. Looking at the courtyards that originally belonged to the Uchiha clan on both sides of the road, those beautiful buildings were now covered with dust, and in some corners, spiders were quietly weaving their own webs. From time to time, there were even 1 or 2 mice, wildcats, and so on running from the corners of the road. Who would have thought that the strong Uchiha clan would be submerged in the torrent of history in an instant? Perhaps, in the future, the Uchiha clan will only become a few lines of cold words in the history books, unconsciously ignored by people. Although Nangongja and the Uchiha clan didn't have a close relationship, but seeing such a scene, he still had a lot of emotions in his heart. Watching him build a tall building, watching him entertain guests, watching him collapse. The world was unpredictable, and fate would always give you a slap in the face inadvertently, letting you know that people's sinister hearts weren't just for show. Nangongja came here to see Itachi's younger brother, who was now the last descendant of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Sasuke. Nangongja didn't know how to describe Itachi's treatment of Sasuke, because sometimes hatred is indeed an important factor that can make people's strength grow rapidly. But hatred is also the poison that can easily distort people's mind and make people lose their way. Originally, Nangongja also wanted to pull Sasuke to the Lion clan's different space to live with the Fugaku couple. But when Nangongja told Itachi about this idea, Itachi immediately replied and rejected Nangongja's kindness. Although it is indeed risky to take Sasuke to the Lion clan's different space, as the last descendant of the Uchiha clan living in Woodleaf, who knows how many people will stare fiercely at Sasuke? If Sasuke disappeared quietly, presumably many people will not be able to sit still, right? But these are not the most crucial reasons why Itachi refused to let Sasuke follow Nangongja to the Lion clan's different space. The ninja world itself is a world where the strong preys on the weak, and any protection is temporary. Those who protect you will not be able to keep you safe forever. And in this world, there must be a stronger existence than the people who protect you. Safety is simply an extravagant hope. The only way to truly protect yourself is to make yourself stronger, so that you can protect yourself. Nangongja's ankle exerted force, and his whole body gently floated like a feather blown by the breeze. Letting his body stop on the branch of a tree, his body was completely hidden in the canopy. Nangongja quietly looked at Sasuke, who was self-training in Fugaku's old residence. Sasuke's body was not wearing thick clothes. Now that the season is approaching late autumn, the slight chill in the air can be said to have a biting trend. But Sasuke's body was still wearing thin clothes, and even the sweat on his body because of the training has soaked his clothes. Sasuke, who is the same age as Naruto and Sakura, obviously has been training for a long time. Probably started self-training at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, right? Nangongja also guessed. This kind of training is indeed very harsh. A child of 6 or 7 years old can be so self-disciplined and so cruel to himself. It's really surprising, and at the same time, it's also scary. Is this the result of Itachi's seed of hatred after it sprouted? It's only been about a year, and a young child has already reached this point. If it's another 5 or 10 years, how stubborn will Sasuke's heart become? Nangongja didn't dare to think about it because the answer must be very sad. Sasuke's strength is still very low, and there is no way to sense that there is a person staring at him from a tree not far from him. A pair of eyes tightly staring at the shuriken target in front of him. Sasuke just wanted to hit the target in front of him with the shuriken in his hand at the moment. The past teachings from Itachi slowly crossed Sasuke's heart. Sasuke has tried to keep himself calm and shoot the shuriken in his hand. But almost all of his shuriken skills are from his brother, the one who made him lose all the people and things he cherished, the one who can only live alone in the empty Uchiha land like this. Sasuke's heart became more and more irritable, because as long as he remembered what Itachi did, Sasuke seemed to see his parents being stabbed in the chest by his brother in front of him. They cried, they wailed, but his brother was completely unmoved, as if he had done something great. His indifferent face showed a kind of unconcealable joy, happy with his maturity. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Sasuke threw the shuriken in his hand out. The sound of the shuriken breaking the wind was so clear. Obviously he used a lot of strength, but none of them really hit the target. His heart involuntarily filled with a kind of powerless anger. Sasuke sat on the ground of his family courtyard. But at this moment, a very harsh voice passed into Sasuke's ear. Ha ha ha! This was laughter. It was the laughter of someone who had seen something very amusing. Chapter 213. Sasuke quickly took out a shuriken from his ninja tool bag and threw it towards the source of the laughter. The person who laughed was naturally Nangongja, who had been watching Sasuke's training. Although the shuriken had been brewing for a long time and still didn't hit the target, Nangongja deliberately laughed out loud to meet Sasuke. Who are you? This is the Uchiha clan's land. Only Uchiha clansmen are allowed to enter. Sasuke just said half of his words, but Nangongja immediately interrupted him. For a moment, Sasuke's cheeks flushed red. He didn't know if it was because of anger or shame. Nangongja looked at Sasuke with a smile. Although he didn't speak, Sasuke was very clear about what the man in front of him wanted to express. The arrogant Uchiha no longer existed. Now, the Uchiha clan only had a wood leaf ninja and a weak child. Such a clan, what right did they have to proudly say to others that, "This is my clan's land, you can't enter at will"? Nangongja played with the shuriken that Sasuke threw at him, feeling the cold touch of the iron shuriken. But soon, as if he was tired of playing with it, his hand didn't seem to use much strength. He just squeezed the shuriken in his hand. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, and then the shuriken in Nangongja's hand, which was specially designed for ninjas, turned into a few pieces of worthless iron. After all, Sasuke was still a child of 6 or 7 years old. Seeing such a scene, even the precocious Sasuke couldn't hide his surprise. In Katan, there was a technique called Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu, which was used by attaching katan to the shuriken. The temperature of the C-class katan is also higher than the temperature of ordinary flames, but even in such flames, the ninja's shuriken didn't turn red or hot, which was enough to show how unusual the material of the shuriken was. However, Nangongja managed to crush the shuriken with his palms, which were made of his own flesh and blood. You want to take revenge on Itachi? Ignoring Sasuke's surprise, Nangongja walked casually to a decorative stone in the yard, sat down leisurely, and looked at Sasuke and asked indifferently. When the name Itachi entered Sasuke's ears, Sasuke's expression changed. His originally gloomy face instantly became slightly distorted. At this moment, Sasuke didn't have the time to think about the gap in strength between himself and Nangongja. In a few steps, he walked to Nangongja's side and stretched out his hand to grab Nangongja's clothes. You know where Itachi is? These words seemed to have been forcefully squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. His resentment and annoyance had already been displayed incisively and vividly in an instant. Looking at Sasuke grabbing his clothes, Nangongja couldn't help but laugh. I know. Sasuke's hand became stronger after Nangongja said such a sentence. It was as if Nangongja's clothes had turned into Itachi's. At this moment, Sasuke just wanted to tear him apart, with his hands, with his teeth, with all his body parts that could hurt people. He is there. Nangongja's eyes flashed with a trace of impatience. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Sasuke's neck in front of him. He abruptly lifted Sasuke up, and the strength of his hand became stronger and stronger. Sasuke's neck was full of blue veins because of being strangled. Sasuke didn't know when his hands, which were originally holding Nangongja's clothes, had already let go. His eyes were filled with a strange mixture of fear and powerlessness. Sasuke remembered the feeling when Itachi coldly stared at him. He remembered the scene when Itachi let him see him kill every clansman with his own hands. Gradually, Sasuke's body began to tremble, and a whimper came out of Sasuke's mouth. It was like the sound of a beaten puppy begging for mercy. Humph! Nangongja swung his hand and directly threw Sasuke to the ground. When you're doing something, you should think about your own capabilities. With your current strength, you still want to find Itachi for revenge? Are you an actor in a burlesque show? You specially came to tell me such a funny joke. Nangongja's words were completely ignored by Sasuke, because at this moment, Sasuke was immersed in his own fear. His body fell to the ground and curled up into a ball. Sasuke's hands hugged his knees as if he wanted to protect himself. His body kept trembling, and a weak whimper came out of his mouth. But the most important thing was his eyes. In his half-closed eyes, there was a blood-red color. With Nangongja's eyesight, he naturally saw it clearly. It was the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai Sharingan. Although it was the lowest level of the Sharingan, it was still much older than many Uchiha ancestors who awakened their Sharingan. One Tomo Sharingan. Nangongja also slightly muttered in his heart. It seems that this is the result of Itachi's stimulation. The Uchiha clan has always used the Sharingan as the core of their strength. Whether it was the shuriken throwing technique or the fire release that was beyond the ordinary ninja, it was actually the existence of the Sharingan. The higher the level of the Sharingan, the higher the strength of the Uchiha clan. It seems that Itachi's understanding of the Sharingan has reached a certain level. That's why he could accurately stimulate Sasuke, so that Sasuke could awaken his Sharingan at such a young age. After all, he and Itachi still had an agreement to bring down Danzo together. Therefore, in order to express his goodwill, Nangongja came to the Uchiha clan to see Sasuke. Although the method was a bit rough, it was also to arouse Sasuke's desire for strength. Only by truly experiencing the feeling of powerlessness can one be truly fearless. What he did was actually in accordance with the guidelines that Itachi specified for Sasuke. Only the Uchiha knew Uchiha best. At least, Nangongja believed that Itachi would not harm his own brother. Chapter 214. So, I will ask you again seriously, are you sure you want me to train you? Looking at Sasuke standing in front of him, Nangongja said seriously with a slightly thin body and a young face. Just 3 days ago, Nangongja appeared in front of Sasuke. He used his strength to make Sasuke realize his powerlessness. Looking at Sasuke curled up on the ground, Nangongja left a note with his address. Nangongja knew that Sasuke would come to find him. Sasuke found him 3 days later. During these 3 days, Nangongja didn't know what Sasuke was thinking and wasn't interested to know. But when Sasuke asked him to train him to make him stronger, Nangongja asked such a question. Yes. Although Sasuke was young, he was very serious when facing Nangongja. My strength is still too weak. I want to defeat Itachi. I want to let the Uchiha clan stand proudly in front of everyone again. So I came here to find you and ask you to help me become stronger. Since you left your address, it naturally means that you are willing to help me. Naruto and Sakura, who are in the same class as you, have received my training, but it is completely different from what you want. I just use some common methods to let them adapt to this world, but you want me to teach you how to kill. I will be stricter and crueler. Since you have decided, I won't allow you to back out halfway. Putting the azure jade wine gourd in his hand beside him, Nangongja changed from sitting in the corridor to standing up, staring at Sasuke. Sasuke didn't say a word, but his eyes were very determined. Very well. Then let's start now? Nangongja smiled. Although such a child wasn't cute, he was very interesting. Far more interesting than Sakura and Naruto combined. I actually don't know any ninjutsu, and I don't want to learn any ninjutsu. I only know the sword to kill. I can only teach you how to use the sword. But before that, I want you to truly understand your weakness. Weakness? Sasuke heard Nangongja's words and said with a little self-mockery, "You can only become strong when you know that you are weak, and you can only become proud when you experience humility. Weakness itself isn't a sin, not wanting to improve is." This sentence is somewhat interesting. Then let's see how weak we really are. Although it was a question, Nangongja didn't give Sasuke a chance to refute. A majestic momentum came out of Nangongja's body. The momentum that once subdued everyone in Blood Cloak Pavilion was released without reservation. Nangongja's murderous aura and hostility gradually outlined the Phantom of Yama behind Nangongja. The Phantom of Yama that was once awakened in the Banishment Senpai's illusion was now gradually controlled and used by Nangongja. What was Yama? It was an existence that dominated all lives and judged all lives. Even if it was just a phantom, Yama's eyes were exceptionally clear. The pure color with a kind of contempt for all living beings was undoubtedly revealed. Perhaps Sasuke was the only one who could describe the horror of Yama's illusion. Those eyes stared at him tightly, as if they could see through him. Whether his good or bad deeds were seen through by Yama's eyes. Sasuke's body trembled and gradually bent under the pressure of momentum. His whole body slowly lowered to the ground. When Sasuke realized it, his body was almost completely close to the ground. Even his face was only an inch away from the ground. When I first came to Woodleaf, a senpai also treated me like this. Maybe it was because he was curious about me, or maybe it was because of a little bit of bad taste. At that time, I also struggled under his pressure, as if I wanted to prove myself. With that, Nangongja couldn't help but think of Woodleaf's white-fanged Hatake Mauso, who was enough to be called his mentor and friend. Nangongja reached out and casually grabbed the green jade gourd beside him, and poured a mouthful of wine into his mouth. White Fang also had to give up his life under the persecution of Woodleaf's higher-ups. Wasn't White Fang's situation similar to his current situation? Would he end up like White Fang? White Fang was like Nangongja's example, constantly reminding Nangongja not to show a trace of weakness. Otherwise, not only would he lose his life, but also all his loved ones would fall into endless sorrow. At this moment, Sasuke couldn't hear Nangongja's words clearly, because Nangongja's pressure made Sasuke have to ignore the existence outside of himself. Compared to Nangongja, Sasuke's physical fitness and strength were much worse. If he really wanted to survive this kind of pressure, he had to ignore all distracting thoughts and explore all his potential. Sasuke's ears kept buzzing, and even his brain had bursts of tingling pain. It seemed that his body was warning him that it had reached a state of high load. Whether it was the sound of his heart beating, the sound of his blood flowing, the sound of his blood vessels expanding, or the sound of his bones rubbing because of the pressure, Sasuke could clearly feel it. Gradually, Sasuke's breathing became difficult. It was as if a ball of fire had been stuffed into his lungs, constantly burning the air and the alveoli inside. Every breath of air that Sasuke breathed in was like a stream of gasoline, constantly pouring on the fire. But Sasuke couldn't stop breathing, and could only suffer like this. Sasuke's limbs were still in pain, but gradually, it was replaced by soreness that constantly attacked Sasuke's brain. Then even the soreness disappeared, leaving only an indescribable state of indifference. Sasuke seemed to have no limbs, no body. Only a vague consciousness was left, and that consciousness kept telling himself that he must persevere. Only by persevering would she be able to appear in front of her beloved brother in a dignified manner. Only then would she be able to live up to the blood that her parents had spilled. Only persevere. Chapter 215. Buzz. When Sasuke's consciousness was clear again, he found that there was a very loud roar in his ears. There was a layer of quilt covering his body. He wanted to reach out and lift the quilt, but no matter if it was his hands or other parts of his body, he couldn't exert any strength. Sure enough, did I try too hard? Sasuke only had this thought in his mind. When he tried to break free from Nangong's coercion, there was a gap in his memory. Looking at his current appearance, it seems that he didn't succeed in breaking free from Nangong's coercion. It's really a bit of a waste. Obviously, he was determined to awaken and become stronger under Nangong's training, but the training just started and he already became this useless. Oh, you're already awake? Nangong's voice sounded in Sasuke's ear. He was half leaning on the door, looking at Sasuke. Although he couldn't exert any strength, Sasuke still forced himself to lift the heavy quilt on his body. Sorry, the training just started and I already became this useless. It's a bit disappointing. Sasuke still sounded very weak when he spoke. Obviously, his body was in a very weak state. Don't say that. After all, it's the first training and I used a bit too much strength. I just wanted to test your current level of strength. It's normal that you can't withstand it. Nangongja waved his hand. Obviously, he wasn't disappointed with Sasuke's performance. He used his full strength to exert coercion, and even an ordinary jonin might not be able to withstand it. Speaking of which, are you hungry? Nangongja looked at Sasuke, and at the same time he slowly stroked his stomach. Although he could make some ordinary food, there was no way to compare with Mashiro and his sister's cooking. Nangongja was also a little tired of eating the food he made all the time. No. Rumble? Sasuke just said one word, wanting to say that he was not hungry. However, his stomach failed to live up to his expectations and growled. In an instant, his tender little face was covered with a layer of red. All right, everyone has to eat. What's there to be shy about? Let's go, I'll take you out to eat. Nangongja saw Sasuke's appearance and couldn't help but laugh. Although this child had been trying his best to be as mature as an adult, his current embarrassed look made him look more like how an adult of his age should look. It was a subtle cuteness. Can you stand up on your own? Looking at Sasuke, Nangongja couldn't help but ask. Of course. Sasuke pressed his hand on the bed, trying to use it as a force to stand up, but after several attempts, he couldn't succeed at all. Nangongja stepped forward and stretched out his hand. Looking at Nangongja's hand, Sasuke hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he couldn't overcome the feeling of hunger in his heart. So he put his small hand on Nangongja's hand. Okay, then let's go. Nangongja smiled and pulled Sasuke out of the courtyard and onto the street. Nangong's place was a bit remote, so there weren't many people. It was late autumn, so everything felt a little bleak. Sasuke didn't pay attention to the surrounding scenery. Instead, he silently felt the heat from Nangongja's palm, and for a moment, he didn't want to talk. Ever since his brother destroyed the Uchiha clan and his parents died, how long has it been since someone held his hand and took him to the street? Every day, he would force himself to get up in the morning before dawn to practice. For a child, getting up early was the most difficult thing. But Sasuke did it with his own obsession, and even persevered day after day. When he first met Nangongja, Sasuke didn't have a good impression of Nangongja. After all, at that time, Nangongja looked so arrogant and unreasonable. He even used all kinds of words to provoke him. Although Sasuke didn't say it explicitly, for anyone who was treated like this, they would feel a little uncomfortable. So when Sasuke saw Nangongja's note with the address written on it, it could be said that Sasuke was actually mentally prepared to be severely tortured by Nangongja. Naturally, the result was not unexpected. Sasuke was already tortured by Nangongja for the first time, and it was difficult for him to exert his strength. However, this image of Nangongja was treating her so gently. Now he was holding his hand and strolling on the street with him. Even the slightly cold autumn wind made Sasuke's heart burn with a touch of warmth that couldn't be erased. Ah, this is the place. In the past, Naruto always told me that there was a super delicious restaurant in Woodleaf, but it wasn't famous, so I always wanted to come here to try it. Today, I finally have the time to come and try it. Don't worry, you've worked hard today. Eat to your heart's content. I'll pay for it. Nangongja shouted at a shabby-looking restaurant with some unknown excitement, then turned his head to Sasuke and promised to eat as much as he wanted. Sasuke was also pulled out of his thoughts and looked at the restaurant in front of him, which had the words Yuraku written on it. It was obviously a very ordinary restaurant, and even the decorative wooden board at the door looked a little broken. However, this place strangely gave off a warm feeling, as if he had returned to his own home. Nangongja lifted the curtain hanging in front of the Yuraku ramen door, and a rough voice sounded. "Welcome." Handa looked at the two slightly unfamiliar customers and said very warmly, "Is there any signature ramen here? It's my first time here. Boss, can you recommend it to me?" Nangongja looked at Handa's enthusiastic appearance and asked with a smile, "Customer, why don't you try our barbecued pork ramen? Many people like to eat this kind of ramen." Handa thought for a moment and said to Nangongja. Nangongja pulled Sasuke over and let him sit on the chair. "Is that so? Then I'll have a big bowl of barbecued pork ramen. What about you, Sasuke?" Sasuke looked at Nangongja, then looked at Handa and said coldly, "I also want barbecued pork." Although Sasuke's expression was a little ugly, Handa and Nangongja looked at each other and smiled, as if they found it very interesting. Then he shouted with his hand, "Okay, 2 bowls of barbecued pork ramen, coming soon." Chapter 216. Soon, 2 bowls of steaming ramen were placed in front of Nangongja and Sasuke. Along with the steam, there was the unique fragrance of the broth made from kunbu and seaweed. The fragrance immediately made Nangongja's appetite. Eating his own cooking for the past few days was really a kind of self-torture. Now that he could finally have a good meal, it was really touching. Looking at Sasuke next to him, the little guy also began to swallow his saliva. "Well, since you're here, let's eat to our heart's content." Nangongja smiled and patted Sasuke's shoulder, then said with a smile. He and Sasuke looked at each other, and together, they put their hands together, clamped the chopsticks in their palms, and shouted together, "I'm going to eat." Whether it was Nangongja or Sasuke, both of them hurriedly broke the disposable chopsticks in their hands and picked up the bowl of ramen in front of them. Nangongja took a sip of the soup, and the rich taste instantly filled Nangongja's entire mouth. Then, Nangongja began to eat heartily. Nangongja kept the bowl of ramen in his mouth, and soon the whole bowl of ramen was almost empty. After Nangongja finished the last mouthful of soup in his hand, he stretched the empty bowl in front of him. Just as he was about to talk to his opponent, Sasuke, who was next to him, also stretched out the empty bowl in his hand. He glanced at Nangongja with an arrogant face, and then said to his opponent, Brother Sasuke, another bowl." Nangongja saw Sasuke's current childlike appearance and smiled slightly. Instead of letting a person lose his most precious childhood for his own purposes, why not let him truly enjoy the childhood that belonged to him? To be able to see a child who was originally very gloomy and cold slowly open his heart and express his feelings, learning to accept others and learn to understand himself was a very joyous thing. "I'll have another bowl too." Nangongja smiled at his hand and said so. The happiest thing for every chef was that the food they cooked could be eaten by the customers happily. Sasuke, who originally didn't look very happy, also became energetic because of eating his ramen. It was really great. Hand was also a person with children, and it was a very happy thing for him to see the energetic appearance of a child. Just as he was about to turn around and call out Nangongja and Sasuke's menu, the curtain of Ichiraka ramen was lifted again. Hand looked at the people who came and said enthusiastically, "Welcome! Welcome, you haven't patronized my business for a long time." Although there was a little complaint in his tone, Hand was obviously very happy that his regulars could come to eat ramen. "Uncle Slap, don't say that. I had to pester my mother to come here to eat." A voice full of vitality sounded, and Nangongja became more and more familiar with it. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a child with golden hair being pulled into Ichiraku ramen by a red-haired lady. When Nangongja saw Naruto, Naruto also saw Nangongja. All of a sudden, Naruto became excited. He directly rushed into Nangongja's arms and shouted happily, "Uncle Nangong, you're here too." It seemed that when he saw the empty bowl in front of Nangongja, Naruto became even happier. "How is it? The taste of this ramen is super good, right? I like the ramen here the most. Whether it's the soup base, the ingredients, or the ramen, they are all super delicious. But I don't know why so few people come here." At the beginning, Hand was still smiling as he watched Naruto praise his ramen. But as he talked, Naruto started complaining that there weren't many customers in Ichiraku Ramen. Ichiraku directly picked up the kind of net used to cook ramen at Hand. He really wanted to hit Naruto's head a few times to let him know how unbearable the anger of the owner of a ramen shop was. But there was a person who directly punched Naruto's head. Naturally, this person was Naruto's mother, Kushina. "You little bastard. How can you talk like that? Ichiraku ramen is really cold. Cough cough. It's really delicious. Hey, you were going to say it's cold, right? Don't cover it up with a dry cough." Naruto directly looked at his mother with tears in his eyes, as if to say that he was not lying. She looked pitiful, but it was very funny. Nangongja looked at the way Naruto and Kushina got along with each other, but he was not surprised at all. On the contrary, he seemed to be very used to it. That's right. Naruto often went to Nangongja's house when he was a child. The scene of Kushina beating Naruto seemed to have happened many times. "Idiot!" Behind Nangongja, Sasuke, who was originally very happy, became cold again at this moment. Then he looked at Naruto and said, at this time, Naruto finally noticed Sasuke behind Nangongja, and he seemed to be very surprised. Pointing his finger at Sasuke, Naruto began to chatter. "Why is it this arrogant guy? Humph, if there is an arrogant guy, the originally delicious ramen will not taste good." Hearing Naruto's words, Sasuke was also angry. "Who are you calling arrogant guy? You idiot! Whoever agreed is an arrogant guy. Last place. Idiot. With you here, the ramen is really not delicious. Children's quarrel is always so boring, and it even makes people feel that they can feel a kind of childish fun." Whether it was Kushina, Nangongja, or Shota, they all looked at the two children with a smile, but Sasuke and Naruto were a little embarrassed. The two children sat in the seats of Ichiraku Ramen, looking at each other, but they kept eating the ramen in their hands. Sometimes they even choked because they ate too fast, and a little bit of soup flowed out of their noses. The two children sulked, but Nangongja quietly pulled Kushina out of the door of Ichiraku Ramen. "Why only you and Naruto came? Where is Watergate?" Nangongja was obviously a little confused, even if Naruto and Watergate didn't fully understand each other. Such a family dinner should not be missing Watergate. Kushina shook her head and seemed to be very upset. "Watergate is in Hokage's office, and he hasn't been home since yesterday. It seems that Wood Leaf's top management has a lot of resentment towards Watergate." Chapter 217. Not to mention Naruto and Sasuke, who were quarreling with each other, and Kushina, who was standing outside Ichiraku Ramen with a depressed face. In a secret room in the Hokage office, Watergate, 3 generations, Danzo, Zhuan Shaochun, and Mito Monitis, these 5 people could almost represent the entire Wood Leaf decision-making team. Danzo was looking at the gloomy faces of 3 generations in Watergate, as well as Zhuan Shaochun and Mito Monitis, who seemed to be thinking about something. Just a day ago, Danzo mentioned to the elders of Kiba the impeachment report against the 4th Hokage, Watergate. Watergate had just returned to Wood Leaf for a few days. Danzo had already prepared a lot of pages of the impeachment report and directly submitted it to the elders of Kiba. Although Hokage had always been the one who appeared in public in Wood Leaf and conveyed various orders about the Wood Leaf, but in fact, Wood Leaf had a 2.5 system of decision-making structure. Hokage was part of it, and the elders of Kiba were part of it. Together, they formed the so-called 2.5 system, and the daimyo of the Fire Country occupied the half position. Of course, now that it was related to the appointment of the Hokage within Wood Leaf, the daimyo of the Fire Country couldn't directly appear, so they didn't send their own representatives to participate in the meeting. As the supervision of the Hokage, the Woodleaf elders played a decisive role in this meeting. The elders of Woodleaf were composed of large and small families and businessmen who occupied important positions in the business. Zhuan Shaochun and Mito Menitis could actually be said to represent the interests of these large and small families and businessmen. Our meeting has been going on for nearly 2 days. I don't know what the representatives of the two elders of the elders think about it. Do you want to let Watergate vote on his impeachment at the elders of the elders meeting? Danzo looked at Mito Menitis and Zhuan Shaochun, who were hesitating, and his expression was a bit bad. The two of them obviously wanted to suppress the matter and quietly resolve it among themselves. But Danzo has already cornered a lot of members of the elders of Kiba and constantly put pressure on the representatives of the two elders. As the 3 generations of the Hokage, Yuan Fei was very well known, and no one could find any fault with him. So Danzo couldn't do anything about it. But as the 4th Hokage, Watergate, not long after he inherited the position of Hokage, and even when his team was not fully formed, he gave up the position of Hokage of Woodleaf and directly pushed the retired Sandaime to the shinobi world. No matter what the reason is, such behavior has made many of the elders feel that Watergate is not the right person to ensure the safety of Woodleaf. This is also the main reason why Danzo was able to gather enough people to put pressure on the elders. As a part of Woodleaf's power, the various families have instinctively felt some danger from Watergate's somewhat willful behavior. Danzo, although Woodleaf does have a bill related to the impeachment of Hokage, Woodleaf has never used it since the establishment of the village. Moreover, Watergate is already the 4th Hokage of Woodleaf. Once such a person known by the shinobi world is deprived of the position of Hokage, we will be in an awkward position. Konoha will be in an extremely awkward position. Not to mention how we will choose the next Hokage, we will also have to face a crisis of trust. As a Woodleaf that accepts commissions from the outside world to get the funds needed to operate, the most important thing is to maintain the trust in the hearts of all potential clients. Once we change our own Hokage, the number of tasks we receive will definitely drop significantly. Such a price, whether it is me, Danzo, or even all the Woodleaf ninjas, can we really afford it? Mito Menitis looked at Danzo. In fact, his mood was not very good. For a long time, although there has always been a little friction between him and the elders led by Zhuan Shaochun, but overall it is very stable, and he has always been able to ensure that he can make a sound and maintain his credibility in Woodleaf. But Danzo did not know what means he used to make many elders stand on Danzo's side. This sense of humiliation and the feeling of being violated made Mito Menitis very uncomfortable. So, can a Hokage who can act according to his own will and abandon the entire Woodleaf really make the people of the shinobi world feel that Woodleaf is trustworthy enough? Whether it is me or the elders, when Watergate left Woodleaf, did anyone get the notice? We are completely in the dark. If Yuan Fei did not stand up and temporarily take over the position of Hokage, what kind of chaos would Woodleaf be in? Danzo actually knew that when Watergate left Woodleaf, he must have informed the 3 generations, but Danzo deliberately ignored this point. In the dual system, the status of the elders has been declining a little bit because Hokage has always been a relatively strong position. Many times the elders have been forgotten. At this time, if Yuan Fei stood up and took the blame for Watergate, if he said that Watergate actually discussed with him, then how would the elders of Kiba feel? This impeachment, it seems that the spearhead is directed at Watergate, but in fact it wants to weaken the credibility of the entire Hokage clan. The impeachment will not succeed. Even Danzo was very clear in his heart. But once the credibility of the Hokage clan is reduced, whether it is the elders or his root, they will get greater benefits. Nangongja returned to the village for so long, but Danzo did not look for Nangongja at all. The fundamental reason is that Danzo is busy playing games with the elders and the 3 generations. Nangongja, who is relatively less valuable, can be temporarily ignored. Sandaime took a deep puff from his tobacco pipe. Wisps of smoke drifted out from the tobacco pipe, shining with a red light. But the eyes of the 3 generations were only staring at Danzo. As an old man who has known Danzo for many years, in fact, 3 generations can only see a little bit of Danzo's plan. But the 3 generations absolutely cannot let Watergate step down from the position of 4th Hokage, It is not so easy to cultivate a person who is qualified to be the Hokage. Once they let go, it is really hard to say who will be the Hokage in the end. All the tricks of Danzo have been put on the surface, have become a real conspiracy. Chapter 218. Danzo's sharp words have forced Mito Menitis, Zhuan Shaochun, and Yuan Fei into a very awkward situation. However, no matter what, as the fourth Hokage, Watergate must not be overthrown, otherwise, it will only cause greater losses. The most urgent thing now is to find a person who will take the blame for Watergate, and this person's status must not be low, otherwise, how can he order around the fourth Hokage? In any case, this impeachment proposal can't be passed by just the two of us. If we must find a person to calm the resentment in the hearts of the people, then let me do it. Anyway, I'm already so old, it doesn't matter if a little bit of dirty water is poured on me. But Watergate is still young. He still has to do more meaningful things for the Woodleaf. Looking at Zhuan Shaochun, Mito Menitis directly stood up, saying that he will clear Watergate's name, and all the mistakes will be placed on him. However, Danzo wasn't satisfied with Mito Menitis coming forward to take all the blame. He looked coldly at Mito Menitis. Danzo said with a sneer, "Hamura, are you old and confused? Do you think the people of Woodleaf are so easy to bully? You are just a representative of the elders of Kiba. How can you order around the Woodleaf's hope, who has the strength and support of the fourth Hokage?" Danzo's words were half flattering and half attacking, making all the people in the room unable to relax. First of all, Danzo can be said to have ruthlessly attacked the status of the elders of Kiba, and secondly, he was also looking down on Mito Menitis and Zhuan Shaochun. "Danzo, you bastard." Mito Menitis was also an impatient person. When he heard Danzo looking down on him and the elders of Kiba, he directly slammed the table. Whether it was his beard or his hair, they all stood up in anger. It seems that if he couldn't hold it in, he would step forward and fight Danzo to the death. But Zhuan Shaochun quietly cast his eyes on the three generations. The three generations have been in power for a long time, whether it is Mito Menitis' performance, Zhuan Shaochun's gaze, or Danzo's aggressiveness. The three generations actually saw through them. The only one who can clear Watergate's name and take the blame for him is himself. From a personal point of view, he is Watergate's advisor. His own disciple made a mistake, so naturally he should solve it. From a political point of view, Minato's position as the fourth Hokage was also promoted by Kuroto. Since Kuroto wanted to list Minato as a candidate for the position of Hokage, Kuroto also had to bear the crime of not being able to judge people properly. Whether it is Mito Menitis, Zhuan Shaochun, or Shimura Danzo, from the beginning, their goal is him and the legacy of the first Hokage. Gently coughing a few times, the three generations knocked the pipe in his hand on the table, and the remaining gray ash and sporadic fire directly floated on the ground. "Hamura, you sit down. This kind of thing is not worth arguing with Danzo. They are all old people. Whether it is doing or speaking, it is best to be a little more mature." That's right. Minato can't be replaced. If someone has to bear the responsibility, then let this old man do it. Anyway, I am going to retire, and things like reputation are not worth caring about. When Watergate left the village, he and I discussed it, and no matter what the process was, in the end, I let Watergate go. Let me bear the responsibility. There is nothing to worry about. We have been in this meeting for 2 days, so let's stop here. Let this old man bear all the consequences. Everyone can go back now. Mito Menitis looked at Watergate, who was sitting in the corner without saying a word, and sighed slightly. Mito Menitis stood up, and just as he was about to say something, three generations waved his hand and interrupted him. "Go back. There is no need to say so much." Whether it was Zhuan Shaochun, Mito Menitis, or Shimura Danzo, they all symbolically bowed to three generations before turning around and leaving the large conference room. Only three generations and Watergate were left in the large conference room. Three generations once again filled his tobacco pipe with shredded tobacco, and a rough hand swept across the tobacco pipe, causing it to burn on its own. The smoke produced by the shredded tobacco slowly began to fill the sealed conference room, as if a thin veil was covering everyone's face. causing everything to fall into a haze. After a long time, 3 generations finally took the lead to speak. Watergate, how do you feel about this kind of meeting? Watergate shook his head, and he seemed to be in a bad mood as he spoke. When I was on a mission, I saw some local officials handling cases. The criminals were tied up and forced to kneel in the hall, and they could only passively accept the judgment. Although I didn't have my hands tied with a rope, it still felt somewhat similar. Being judged like this, being criticized like this, and not being able to fight in my own hands really made me feel bad. 3 generations saw Watergate's somewhat vexed face and smiled instead. You're still too young. Although my life seems to be glorious, it's not rare for me to break my teeth and swallow my pride. We're born as humans, and we're destined to face all kinds of problems. Some of them are provoked by you, and some of them you can't resist at all. These things can't be avoided. Did you see what those people were trying to do? Watergate wasn't a stupid person. Although this meeting was to decide whether his impeachment would pass, he was actually just an excuse. Only when these people wanted to prove their righteous position would they pull out Watergate's actions and criticize him a few times, but in fact, their goal wasn't that at all. They're just not satisfied with the power in their hands, and they want to have more power in Woodleaf. I can still understand these things. 3 generations looked at Watergate's slightly depressed face and smiled, as if the person who was forced to abdicate wasn't him at all. It's good that you can see it. When I took over, Woodleaf was still very united, so the situation was a little better than yours. What you need to face now is Root, who is fully fledged, and the family alliance that thirsts for power. The key is to let go of some things at the right time so that they can temporarily settle down and receive more opportunities to strengthen their power. Chapter 219. The 3 generations looked at Watergate in front of them and saw that Watergate's complexion was still not very good. So they knew that Watergate still hasn't completely gotten over it. But some things are still the most important thing to understand slowly, so the 3 generations didn't intend to entangle too much on this matter. Since you have returned to Woodleaf, then I think you have already found out some information about that organization, right? Is there any valuable information? The 3 generations also consciously changed the topic and began to ask Watergate about the results of his investigation in the ninja world. Yes, this is an organization that mainly operates in the Rain Country. They call themselves Akatsuki, and they think that they are an organization that brings light to the ninja world. Watergate organized his words and said to the 3 generations, "Such an organization? Although the purpose of their propaganda sounds very powerful, but if you think about it carefully, I feel that something is wrong. Bringing light to the ninja world, it does sound very powerful, but it still makes people feel a little scared, and they always feel that this organization is not simple. Indeed, when I investigated them in the ninja world, I have seen many traces left behind after their actions. Even if the battle of ninjas does have a greater impact on the natural landscape, they seem to have reached the point of being unscrupulous, and many innocent lives will be affected by their battle. Just based on what I know, there are already 4 or 5 villages that have been destroyed because of their actions." Watergate was also angry because, generally speaking, ninjas will choose to fight in no man's land. Such actions that cause a large number of civilian casualties are rare in the ninja world because all civilians are, to some extent, the potential customers of every ninja village. If their customers are greatly reduced, doesn't it mean that their income will also be greatly reduced? No ninja village will do such a stupid act of killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Although Watergate seemed to be filled with righteous indignation, the 3 generations were very calm. On the surface, ninjas will take the initiative to avoid civilians to fight, but in many cases it is completely impossible to avoid civilian casualties, but whether it is made public or not still depends on the result of the discussion between the ninja village and the government. Woodleaf wasn't such a clean place. Then, do you have any leads on their leader? The 3 generations were obviously more concerned about who was the leader of this organization. Yes, if there is no accident, the leader of this organization is 2 of the 3 disciples that Jiraiya-sensei once taught in the Rain Country. They are Nagato and Konan. Hearing Nagato's name, the 3 generations were obviously a little shocked. The child named Nagato had the eyes of Hagoromo Sanin. Although Watergate wasn't clear about such information, as Jiraiya-sensei, Jiraiya had told him about it. The child with the Rinnegan, who Jiraiya said was most likely to be the child of prophecy in the Great Toad Sage's prophecy, was enough to leave a deep impression on the 3 generations. Sensei knows the most about these 2 people, so I returned to Woodleaf, hoping to meet with Sensei and discuss about them. Watergate's idea was very simple. His sensei, Jiraiya, as the person who taught Nagato and Conan, was naturally the most qualified person to speak on the actions of these 2 people. The 3 generations, because they knew more information, also felt that they shouldn't act without authorization, so they also agreed with Watergate's plan to recall Jiraiya. Well, everything will wait for Jiraiya to come back and think about it. Time passed day by day, and Woodleaf was the same as usual, except for the documents issued by the 3 generations a few days ago, stating that Watergate went to the shinobi world to perform a secret mission with his permission, and now he has officially returned to take over the position of Hokage. There was no other news worth paying attention to. However, Nangong's home wasn't as stable as Woodleaf seemed on the surface. Nangongja was sitting in his living room at the moment, receiving a person he didn't want to see. 2 coarse porcelain quilts were filled with steaming hot tea. The 2 of them sat facing each other like this. However, root ninjas were constantly patrolling around Nangong's house, and some passers-by who occasionally passed by were blocked by root. To be honest, I never thought you would be so bold. You destroyed one of my bases, and you dare to come back to Woodleaf so openly. Shimura Danzo looked at Nangongja opposite him, and his tone was very calm, as if his vase was broken by a naughty boy, and he didn't care at all. My courage has always been big, right? This time, if I didn't happen to meet Watergate and was directly pulled back to Woodleaf by him, it really wouldn't be the time for us to meet again. Nangongja picked up the quilt in front of him and took a sip of tea, but his brows slightly wrinkled, obviously. Compared to the bitter tea, he preferred the mellow wine. Danzo didn't seem to hear the threat in Nangongja's tone. He casually rolled his eyes in Nangongja's house, then looked at Nangongja as if he found something interesting. You still don't have enough courage, otherwise our organization Sora and your sister would probably come back with you. Hearing the code name Sora, Nangongja couldn't suppress his anger anymore. The hand holding the teacup trembled slightly, and a drop of tea was shaken out of the quilt. These things that Danzo said were the most untouchable things in Nangongja's heart. His sister, Mashiro, and little linger in Danzo's mouth. It was like an object used to threaten Nangongja. But Danzo said it so casually, it really made Nangongja feel very uncomfortable in his heart. Danzo, although you do have root in your hands, Woodleaf is not only Danzo's Woodleaf. It's better not to be too aggressive. Nangongja's eyes slightly glanced in the direction of the Hokage office. Watergate's subordinates are still young. As a person with superior strength, Nangongja is the best candidate to win over, because he absolutely has no involvement with Root and the elders of Kiba. Even because his family was kidnapped by Root, Woodleaf Whitefang, who was his teacher and friend, committed suicide under the influence of Root. It's a pity that such a person is not in his hands. Chapter 220. Hearing Nangongja's threatening words, Danzo didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed in a mocking and pitiful way. I really didn't expect that just a kid who is still wet behind the ears and a person who is already half dead could bring you such a sense of security. You are still as naive as before. Since you are so confident that they will bring you shelter, then let's wait and see how much help they can provide you. At the beginning, Danzo thought that Nangongja was actually a somewhat naive kid. Just by relying on his own strength, he felt that he could live a good life in Woodleaf. Now, with just a promise from the Hokage clan, he could be so confident, which really made Danzo feel a little funny. But was Nangongja really as naive as Danzo thought? How could Nangongja not have the slightest progress over the years? When Nangongja knew that he had to find the Blood Cloak Pavilion to increase his strength, Nangongja knew that strength was just a part of his life. Countless tricks, countless conspiracies, all of them were things that he had to guard against. Here, Nangongja was just following Danzo's impression of him, showing weakness to the enemy. If Nangongja really put everything he had on the Hokage clan, then he was really naive to a certain extent. There was no such thing as trust when it came to using each other. As long as one side had a better choice, the cooperation would naturally disappear. Nangongja didn't believe anything about Wood Leaf. Danzo was too lazy to communicate with Nangongja. He directly got up and was ready to leave Nangongja's house. After taking a deep look at Nangongja, Danzo directly turned and left. Naturally, the ninjas from Root also followed Danzo. At this moment, Watergate has been standing at the gate of Wood Leaf for a long time. The flame on his Haori was blown by the wind from time to time, and the words "Fourth Hokage" on the back seemed to be shining under the sun. Watergate has been standing here since the morning. From time to time, he would greet some ninjas coming and going, but he didn't leave. It seemed like he was waiting for someone important. Finally, the sun has rotated in the sky, and a familiar figure finally appeared in front of Watergate's eyes. The slightly gray hair and painted face entered Watergate's eyes for a moment. For some reason, Watergate's eyes were covered with mist. The person who came was his master, one of Wood Leaf's Sannin, Jiraiya. "Oh, isn't this Watergate? You're still so energetic." From a distance, Jiraiya waved his hand. Apparently he saw Watergate and greeted him. Watergate wasn't as casual as Jiraiya. He bowed to Jiraiya with both hands. Watergate said very seriously, "Welcome back, Master. Do you still need to be so formal with me? I hate trouble the most. You're really making me a little unhappy." Jiraiya just came back, and seeing Watergate's appearance, he seemed to feel a little troublesome. But from the slightly red eyes, it was obvious that Jiraiya was still very happy to see his disciple, and he was very excited. Perhaps this is a way for Jiraiya to hide his inner thoughts? Speaking of which, why are you and the old man so anxious to let me come back? The letter to me was also very vague. It just said that there was an important discovery, and I came back from far away. Indeed, looking at Jiraiya's appearance, he did look a little travel-worn. His gray hair was covered in a thin layer of dust, and his face, which was painted red, showed signs of tiredness that could not be ignored. "It's a big deal. Let's go meet the 3 generations together and talk about these things." Speaking of business, Watergate's face became more serious. "Has the old man been waiting for me? Although I'm not in Wood Leaf, I still know a little about the recent news about the old man. It seems that during this time, the old man can only stay in his own home and wait for the limelight to pass." Yes, the news about the 3 generations taking the blame for Watergate has spread far and wide. Although many people in the ninja world don't know the inside story, they really think that Watergate left Wood Leaf because of some mission, but how can Jiraiya not know? This notice looked like an ordinary one, but it wasn't enough to throw Sandame's old face to the ground and stomp on it. Sandame even used his foot to crush it. "This is all my fault." It's okay if Jiraiya didn't mention it, but when Jiraiya said such a thing, Watergate felt very uncomfortable. After all, this big blame was created by him, and he even had to watch the 3 generations take the blame without doing anything. Jiraiya also saw the sadness in his disciple's heart. He took a few steps forward and put his hand on Watergate's shoulder and said, "Why are you like this? In my impression, my disciple named Watergate is a person who can still face any setbacks with a smile. Although this matter has indeed damaged the old man's reputation, it is also something that we, the elders, should do. For the future of the ninja world, not to mention a blame, even if you give up your life, what's the pity? Look at it. Since you feel guilty now, naturally, you have to be more courageous and make a real contribution to let everyone know that whether it's me or the old man's sacrifice, it's not only for our disciples, but also for the future of Wood Leaf." Jiraiya, who was still laughing and joking, said to Minato with a serious tone, "At the age of Jiraiya and the 3 generations, some of their own things have become very light. What's the point of the world slandering me? As long as what I do can make me feel worthy, then everything else is not worth mentioning." Watergate looked up at Jiraiya. In fact, many people have said similar words to him in the past few days, but when such words came from his master's mouth, Watergate could understand his own heart. His eyes, which originally looked sad, glowed with a glimmer of brilliance at this moment. Holding his master's hand, Watergate and Jiraiya walked into Woodleaf together. Just like when he was young, Jiraiya took his hand and walked with him in Woodleaf. Chapter 221. In the mansion of the Three Generations, Jiraiya, Three Generations, and Watergate were sitting at a small wooden table. Obviously, they were talking about some extremely important topics because the three of them didn't look so good. So, Watergate's investigation proved that the organization that attacked Woodleaf was actually created by my disciples in the Rain Country. Jiraiya seemed to be a little sad, and his voice was very low. Yes, I wasn't sure about the identity of their leader, but when I met Nangongji on the road, combined with his description and some clues I found, I did point everything to Nagato and Conan, who were among the disciples that Sensei once accepted in the Rain Country. Watergate repeated everything he knew to Three Generations and Jiraiya, but Jiraiya still looked a little strange. Whether it was Three Generations or Watergate, they saw it clearly. Obviously, there was a discrepancy in the information between the two sides. Because Jiraiya also investigated everything about Akatsuki in the ninja world over the years, it was normal to get some information. Sensei, do you have any doubts? Jiraiya didn't say some information about himself, so Watergate had to ask. Indeed, I have collected a lot of information about this organization over the years. The name Akatsuki has a lot of information that matches what I have collected, but in my information, the one who controls the Akatsuki is not Nagato, and I don't even have the slightest bit of information about the red-haired boy. But a person named Pain is the actual leader of Akatsuki, and the ninja who uses paper release is definitely my former disciple Conan. Pain? Nagato? Watergate didn't expect that his information would be so different from the information collected by Jiraiya. From Jiraiya's description, Watergate already knew that Nagato was a red-haired young man. But Jiraiya said that no ninja with red hair was found in Akatsuki. In fact, I also found the problem with Jiraiya. Woodleaf has quietly put a nail in Akatsuki. Because of various reasons, it's not convenient for me to disclose the truth to you. Our undercover agent from time to time has indeed pointed out that every time Akatsuki organization's leader is a person with orange hair who seems to have Rinnegan. And there is another news. Three Generations said, but couldn't help but look at Jiraiya. There was unconcealable sadness in his eyes. When Jiraiya heard Three Generations say this, and even showed such a look, he couldn't help but panic. It seemed that this person had a deep relationship with him and Three Generations. Gently opening his mouth, Jiraiya spat out the name of a person who used to be his best friend, but gradually drifted away and went on a different path. Orokamortal. The Sandaime nodded silently, apparently also immersed in his memories. The child who was very enthusiastic about ninjutsu, the child with a cold face and a warm heart, was completely gone now. Only a lunatic who almost had a paranoid desire for immortality, and even crossed the bottom line again and again. Our undercover agent doesn't seem to get along very well with Orokamortal. There were a lot of fights between the two. But it's certain that Orokamortal won't leave Akatsuki in a short time, and he seems to have a very deep cooperation with Akatsuki. Although Three Generations didn't explain the specific content of the cooperation, but thinking about what Orokamortal did in the past, it naturally wasn't a good thing. It must have involved the lives of countless people, as well as the use of forbidden techniques. So what are we going to do with this Akatsuki? Watergate couldn't help but ask. His master and master were so immersed in the memories of the past that there was no way to solve the problem they were facing now. In any case, since Akatsuki has already attacked Ninetales once, then naturally there will be a second time and a third time. This is a major event related to the life of his wife and child. Watergate couldn't just ignore it. We still need to hold back for the time being, since Akatsuki has been silent for so many years. They must have a lot of plans, although we know some information about them. But such shallow information can't let us know their purpose. No matter how good a snake is at hiding, when the time comes, it will absolutely not hold back. We just need to strengthen the protection of Naruto, and at the same time step up the investigation of them. We must hit them directly on their weak point, we can't give them a chance to reignite. Jiraiya was very calm and made his own conclusion. Jiraiya didn't know how many times he had seen a snake that didn't die, and it would hurt them. Killing them with one blow was the best action. Moreover, Wood Leaf couldn't afford such a large-scale deployment of people. Because once a large-scale mobilization of ninjas, some of the contradictions within the village will completely erupt, and the loss will simply outweigh the gain. Now what Wood Leaf needed most was to stabilize, gradually reconcile and solve some of its own contradictions, and then think about more things. This is the so-called internal stability must be stabilized first. But Watergate still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by 3 generations. Jiraiya is right, Wood Leaf is indeed not a good time to mobilize ninjas on a large scale. Akatsuki is indeed a threat, but they can't make Wood Leaf fall into the trap of destruction. But once we act rashly and stimulate all the problems within the village, then Wood Leaf will be in a lot of turmoil. Looking at 3 generations and looking at his master, Watergate's originally hot heart instantly became a little cold. Sure enough, now it's only his wife and children who are threatened, not the entire Wood Leaf. Even if he is the Hokage of Wood Leaf, there is no way to mobilize the power of the village to protect his wife and children. The reason why the Sandaime agreed to use part of his power to protect his wife and children was because he was his grand disciple. If he wasn't his disciple, he wouldn't even have such a protective force, right? This was the attitude that a superior should have, putting everything on a scale and weighing every ounce. As long as it is in his own interest and the interest of the village, what can't he give up? Chapter 222. Clang! The sound of metal clashing sounded in the courtyard of Nangong's house, and a handful of dust flew in the courtyard. Sasuke shook his head and shook off the dust stuck on his head. But his eyes were extremely unwilling, because he could be said to have the upper hand. Well, not bad, your strength has obviously increased a lot. Even if you fight against a Chunin, you may not necessarily lose, at least you can delay for a long time. And this is just you using the sword skills I taught you. If you can fully use the strange means that you have as a ninja and keep a calm heart, then defeating a Chunin is not impossible. Nangongja leaned on a wooden sword made of oak in his hand and looked at Sasuke with satisfaction. It's not the same. I'm using a long sword made of metal used by ninjas, and you're just using a wooden sword. Even so, I still haven't gained any particularly obvious advantage. Although Sasuke was not convinced before, after calming down a little, Sasuke found a huge gap between himself and Nangongja. The sword in his hand was made of metal specially provided by ninjas. If an iron sword collided with such a long sword, it would be directly cut in two in an instant. But looking at the long sword in his hand with a little gap on the blade, and then looking at Nangongja's oak sword, Sasuke clearly saw the gap between himself and Nangongja. I didn't let you use ninjutsu and Kekkei Genkai just now, so you didn't fully use your strength. If you really used these powers, I would have a lot of trouble just relying on sword skills. Yes, now Sasuke can use the Uchiha clan's Kekkei Genkai Sharingan. From the beginning, when Itachi used Genjutsu to recreate the scenes of his clansmen being slaughtered and his parents being ruthlessly deprived of their lives, Sasuke has been greatly stimulated and awakened the one-tomo form of Sharingan, but he has been subconsciously suppressing his own power. Nangongja has already noticed this power sleeping in Sasuke's body. For 3 years, Nangongja has not only taught Sasuke swordsmanship, but also helped Sasuke stabilize the power of his Sharingan. Of course, during this period, Nangongja also returned to the Lion Clan space more than once to ask Uchiha Fugaku about some information about training Sharingan. When Fugaku knew that this information was to train his youngest son, he naturally didn't hide it. A lot of secret information about the Uchiha clan's Sharingan was revealed by Fugaku. As the head of the Uchiha clan, Fugaku also knew what kind of secrets were recorded in the stone tablet of his family's ancestral hall. Nangongja didn't have the blood of the Uchiha clan, and he wasn't even a person who practiced chakra, so Fugaku was less wary of Nangongja. Although Nangongja lived a stable life in Wood Leaf in the past 3 years, Danzo, as the leader of Root, didn't find trouble with Danzo. Occasionally, Nangongje would help the Hokage clan solve some difficult problems, and he got along well with Watergate and the Three Generations. Although Nangongje was a little surprised that Wood Leaf didn't take any action against Akatsuki. These were some of Wood Leaf's internal affairs after all. Nangongje was too lazy to care about them. The one who was really threatened by Akatsuki wasn't him, so why should he worry about Wood Leaf? Well, today's training is over. You are not only a person who practices swordsmanship, but also a ninja. Ninja's ninjutsu is an advantage that can't be easily given up. You don't have the qualifications to practice internal force, so you can't practice sword chi that is most compatible with swordsmanship. So chakra is your most reliable means, and I'm also looking forward to whether you can combine chakra and swordsmanship in a more interesting way. Nangongje smiled, walked to the side of Sasuke, and gently stroked his hand on Sasuke's head. After such a long time, Sasuke didn't have the usual vigilance and distrust towards Nangongje. Time reveals a person's heart. When Nangongje taught him, Sasuke's heart was clear about the care and attention that Nangongje gave him. Although he still wanted to make himself stronger, to stand in front of his brother and let him tell him the truth about the Uchiha clan's extermination, Sasuke was calmer. Practicing swordsmanship itself was a kind of sharpening of the body and spirit of the practitioner, letting a person slowly fade away some of the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart. Although he was still very firm in his pursuit, it was difficult to be affected by external things, and he faced everything calmly. Although Nangongje never analyzed the details of the Uchiha clan's extermination with Sasuke, Sasuke also analyzed some of the details brought by himself. The Uchiha clan was able to suppress Wood Leaf Village. Naturally, they had their own strength advantage. Uchiha Itachi is indeed one of the strongest in the Uchiha clan, but that's all he's capable of. With such strength, it is too absurd to think that they can destroy a powerful clan like the Uchiha clan in such a short period of time. Perhaps Itachi used some shady means to destroy the Uchiha clan, but there are still many other things that he didn't do. Sasuke felt that the truth he had been diligently seeking was about to be placed in front of him. Whether it was Itachi who destroyed the Uchiha clan or not, as long as he could confront Itachi and hear more information about how Itachi destroyed the Uchiha clan, he could naturally get the answer he wanted to know. The more he said, the more loopholes would be exposed. His brother, the person who doted on him so much since childhood, the more Sasuke thought about it, the more he felt that everything was not so simple. In the matter of the Uchiha clan's destruction, it was likely that there were more hidden inside stories. If it was really Itachi who destroyed the Uchiha clan, then he would definitely let his brother pay the price he should pay. But if his brother did such a thing under any unavoidable coercion, or was forced to carry such a black pot, Sasuke would certainly not let the person behind the scenes have an easy time. 3 years of teaching from Nangongje made Sasuke no longer a naive and easily deceived child. Instead, he became a more rational person. No one really knew whether this rationality was floating on the surface or really deeply engraved in Sasuke's heart. Chapter 223. Looking at Sasuke's departing figure, Nangongje suddenly felt that although he didn't directly do anything far-reaching in the past 3 years, however, he had quietly sharpened a sharp blade for this world that was like stagnant water but had always been surging with undercurrents. Once the sharp blade reveals its sharpness, perhaps the entire ninja world will be shaken by such a sharp blade. Nangongje slowly closed the door of his house, and the courtyard that was originally a bit messy because of the battle between the two fell into the silence of the past for a while. Nangongje gently rolled up his sleeves and took out a slightly large broom from behind the door. He took it and slowly cleaned his courtyard. When Nangongje was wholeheartedly cleaning his messy courtyard, a person wearing a blue robe with his face covered appeared behind Nangongje. "Greetings, head." The person who came was naturally the disciple of the Bloodcloth Pavilion's Azurefan Temple. When Nangongje began to settle down in the Wood Leaf, Azurefan always reported some important information to Nangongje from time to time. For some reason, Azurefan can be said to be the one who recognized Nangongje the most among the 5 altar lords of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Azure Fan simply supported Nangongzhe to control the Bloodcloth Pavilion without any reservation, although Azure Fan still had some secrets of his own. But Nangongzhe knew that if the water was too clear, there would be no fish, and if people were too observant, there would be no disciples. So Nangongzhe didn't care so much about Azure Fan. He had his own plans. Nangongzhe was still cleaning his courtyard with the huge broom in his hand, and didn't look at the disciple of Azure Fan Temple who was kneeling behind him. This disciple seemed to know Nangongzhe's temperament, so he stood up and said to Nangongzhe, "Kuroto-sama, during this period of time, the shinobi world has been relatively stable. Almost nothing of particular importance has happened. Every shinobi village is holding back to develop their own strength. However, the Akatsuki that you specifically asked us to monitor has recently changed their personnel. Although we can't go deep into the Amigakure to investigate the detailed information, we can be sure that the Amigakure is constantly gathering their strength. It seems that there is something big going on." From the moment Nangongzhe arrived at the Wood Leaf Village, the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion began to contact Nangongzhe. The first order given by Nangongzhe was to monitor Amigakure and Akatsuki in it. After all, although he didn't really see the leader of Akatsuki, Nagato, Konan, and Haiden left a deep impression on him. He had helped Konan to capture Deidara. Presumably he had already joined Akatsuki under Konan's means. Itachi Uchiha also seemed to be under surveillance to a certain extent, as the information he sent to him was getting fewer and fewer. Nangongzhe boldly speculated that perhaps some of Akatsuki's accumulation has basically been completed. They are just waiting for an opportunity to change from a dormant state into a colorful tiger with fangs and stir up the shinobi world. Clearwater Altar also attached great importance to Nangongzhe's orders. They sent more than one wave of spies to quietly sneak into the Amigakure to inquire about the information, but almost none of the infiltration operations were successful. Fortunately, the disciples of Clearwater Altar were all experts in hiding. When they found out that their infiltration operation failed, they quickly retreated, and the Akatsuki didn't dig out their own traces. Therefore, the disciples of Clearwater Altar could only retreat and lurk in the towns relatively close to the Amigakure and some of the roads that must be passed through. They used some scattered information about the Amigakure to infer the actions of the Amigakure. When the professionals of Clearwater Altar inferred the abnormal personnel transfer of the Amigakure, they immediately came to Nangongzhe to inform Nangongzhe of the information. Nangongzhe's sweeping action also suddenly stopped, but then he still very casually used the broom in his hand to sweep the courtyard. The Akatsuki's movements, as an organization with a huge goal, every action will not be without reason. Since they had taken action again after a long period of silence, they naturally had something to ask of him. With the power of the Akatsuki, what else can they covet? Is it a huge amount of wealth or some precious resources in the shinobi world? No, if these things really appeared, as one of the 5 great shinobi villages, Wood Leaf Village will not do nothing. This proves that the Akatsuki is plotting something that only they know, and the impact is not that big, but it is very necessary for them. The country of Rain was a small country that was sandwiched between 3 big countries. What did they lack? They don't care about the population. For a shinobi village and an organization, the population represents more people who may be able to form a fighting force. It is not known by most people in the shinobi world, but it has a number of people or fighting force that even the Akatsuki is envious of. The Akatsuki's appetite is really not small. Doing such a thing, they are not afraid of breaking their teeth, and even exposing themselves to the shinobi world. Nangongzhe looked at the courtyard that was almost cleaned by him, and handed the broom in his hand to the disciple of Clearwater Altar standing behind him. The disciple of Clearwater Altar also understood and put the broom back behind the door. Walking towards the house, Nangongzhe took out a piece of paper and a brush full of ink from his study room. Gently writing a few words on the paper, Nangongzhe folded the paper a few times and handed it to the disciple of Clearwater Altar. If there is no accident, the goal of the Akatsuki is on this paper. After you go back, give this letter to Clearwater as soon as possible. After Clearwater sees this letter, he will naturally know how to deal with the next matter. Haha, things have really become interesting. This is also a rare opportunity for me. I have to make good use of it. Yes. Although the disciple of Clearwater Altar was somewhat strange about Nangong's reaction, and why was he so sure about his speculation? But as a disciple of Clearwater Altar, completing all the tasks assigned to him is the most important thing. The disciple of Clearwater Altar quickly hid his figure and left the courtyard of Nangong's house and returned to the small stronghold of Clearwater Altar in the Woodleaf. Soon, the letter written by Nangongja was already in the hands of the master of Clearwater Altar, namely Clearwater. Bai Shui coldly glanced at the urgent letter from Nangongja in his hand, then casually threw the letter into a burning furnace beside him. Worthy of being the person I chose to be able to see through these things, he is more witty than those idiots. Since there is such a rare opportunity, if I don't grasp it well, wouldn't it be a pity? Chapter 224. In the meeting room of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the 5 altar lords, who were the symbols of the Bloodcloth Pavilion's power center, were sitting quietly in front of their respective seats. Originally, there were 6 chairs here, and one of them was placed on the main seat. However, Nangongja had been in the Woodleaf Pavilion for 3 years. Unknowingly, the chair that belonged to Nangongja had been quietly taken away. Bai Shui, why did you call all of us here in such a hurry? Do you have something important to tell us? Our Scarlet Flame altar has a lot of things to do recently. Don't drag me here just because of some insignificant matter. Seeing that the 5 altar masters had all arrived, Scarlet Flame said to Bai Shui Ru impatiently. As the 5 altar lords of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, they all had their own missions. Unless it was something important, they would not have time to gather together. That's natural. Bai Shui was very clear about Scarlet Flame's character. Normally, he would have taught this brute a lesson, but Bai Shui didn't do so. This kind of behavior caused the other altar masters to raise their spirits. This was because Bai Shui's behavior was indeed different from his usual self. The Jade Water Altar itself was the intelligence department of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. They were the eyes and ears of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. A lot of important information had to be passed through the Jade Water Altar's intelligence system. Only then would the other altar lords know about it. Seeing that everyone had quieted down, Bai Shui nodded secretly. She cleared her throat and distributed the stack of information next to her to the other altar lords. This is the information that our Jade Water Altar has recently collected. Everyone, take a look carefully. The few altar masters also opened up the documents in front of them very seriously. They were like primary school students who were reading very seriously, almost word by word as they slowly read through the documents. In the entire meeting room, aside from the sound of everyone's breathing, there was only the sound of paper being flipped. After a while, the altar lords carefully read the information that was not too thick. I say, Bai Shui, why do you take that brat's words so seriously? Isn't he just a nominal altar lord? He actually gave such a direct order to the Bloodcloth Pavilion. This brat thinks. Scarlet Flame said impatiently as he casually tossed the information in his hand onto the table. Nangongja was just a figurehead in the Blood Garment Pavilion. The management of the Blood Garment Pavilion could not interfere at all. Fortunately, this kid was quite tactful and hid in Konoha for the past 3 years. Otherwise, he didn't know what kind of person he would be after being bullied by some people in the Bloodcloak Pavilion. But he didn't expect this guy to be so restless even in Woodleaf Village. He even dared to directly order Clearwater Altar to monitor Amagecure's actions. Although the Bloodcloak Pavilion didn't care about the reason for their hostility with the Rain Village, directly inquiring about other people's information was just asking for trouble. Scarlet Flame wasn't someone who liked to use his brain, but Nangongja's order made Scarlet Flame feel that Nangongja was being too childish. Look at this information. It was all records of Amagecure's ninja's movements. It was worthless at all. Such information was collected by Clearwater Altar with a lot of resources. Isn't this too much of a loss? But as Scarlet Flame was talking, Aoki glared at him fiercely. Scarlet Flame could only swallow his words. After all, Aoki's qualifications were worthy of everyone's respect. Scarlet Flame. Enough. Since Nangongja passed the Dragon Transformation Road, then he is the rightful altar lord of our blood garment pavilion. This kind of matter isn't for a junior like you to butt in. Do what you need to do, and don't say such useless words." As he spoke, Qing Mu turned his gaze towards Bai Shui. "Bai Shui, you can continue. What's wrong with this information that requires all of us to gather together?" Clearwater nodded after hearing Aoki's words. She glanced at Scarlet Flame and continued. "Presumably, you have carefully read the information in front of you. Most of them are records of Amagacure's personnel movements when Clearwater Altar was monitoring the Amagacure. The personnel movements before 3 months ago were some very ordinary records. Clearwater Altar directly removed these things. The information in front of you is all records of the Amagacure's personnel movements in the past 3 months. We obviously found something wrong with it. By comparing the number of people leaving the village and the number of people entering the village, we found that there is a huge difference between them. Just from our records, we can find that there are nearly 2,000 ninjas gathering outside the Amagacure. Even the 5 great ninja villages, as the biggest forces in the ninja world, would be very difficult for them to take out nearly 2,000 ninjas at once. But the Amagacure quietly put such a huge force in the ninja world. I think we should be vigilant against such behavior. When our first seat received this information, he also reminded us to pay more attention to it. After all, the actual ruler of the Amagacure is the Akatsuki. In the previous operation, the Akatsuki showed part of their power in front of our altar lord. They already have the strength to compete with us or even stronger than us. In fact, there are only a few forces that can make the Akatsuki gather such a huge force to fight against. The possibility of them using force against the 5 great ninja villages can be said to be very small. So we must be prepared. 2,000 ninjas. Those are ninjas, not ordinary soldiers. When such a force came out from Clearwater's mouth, the faces of several altar lords who were sitting in their seats changed. If such a force really attacked the Bloodrobe Pavilion, would the Bloodrobe Pavilion, whose strength was scattered, be able to withstand such a force? A big question mark appeared in everyone's heart. What we need now is to gather as much strength as possible for a rainy day. Finally, Clearwater made the final conclusion. Clearwater believes that it is necessary to gather all the forces that the Bloodrobe Pavilion can gather to face the threat from the Akatsuki. Chapter 225. When Bai Shui's words came out, the complexion of the other altar lords of Bloodcloth Pavilion, who hadn't been moved by Akatsuki's actions, immediately changed. Isn't this a bit too much? Hutu, who had always been simple and honest, was the first to speak. The strength of our Bloodcloth Pavilion is indeed very scattered, but that's because we have our own mission. We all need to obtain enough resources to maintain the existence of Bloodcloth Pavilion, money and other necessities, so we are scattered all over the ninja world. Now, because of some assumptions, we have to directly give up our operations all over the world. Isn't this a bit too much? The maintenance of an organization has never been a simple matter, and most of the manpower of Bloodcloth Pavilion is also scattered in some important resources and industries. Once these people are recalled, it means that they have to give up some of their own industries. Even if it's only a temporary suspension of operations, the loss caused by it is immeasurable, and no matter what, once they fall behind by a step, it won't be easy to catch up again. Moreover, the 5 altar lords were leading their own subaltars, and each of them had their own plans. If they really recalled their own personnel according to Bai Shui's suggestion, it will have a huge impact on each subaltar. On the contrary, Bai Shui altar itself obtains resources through intelligence and assassination, so it won't be affected that much. Not being stingy with using the darkest thoughts to speculate on everyone's words and suggestions was a trait that every superior should possess. Wasn't it? Indeed. This is somewhat making a fuss over a minor issue. After hearing Hutu's words, Rue Jin also voiced his opinion. Even old man Aoki slowly nodded his head, and seemed to think that the words of Rue Jin and Hutu were actually very reasonable. I think that Brat is harboring evil intentions. He wants to use such news to shrink or even reduce the strength in our hands, so that he can rightfully sit on his position as the head of the table. Seeing that all of them didn't agree with Bai Shui's proposal, for a while, Nangongja seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and he splashed dirty water on Nangongja. However, a chill suddenly engulfed Scarlet Flame's entire body. Jade Water was currently looking at him with a slight smile. Her smile was like a flower, but her eyes were frighteningly cold. Scarlet Flame could only smile awkwardly and quickly shut his mouth. If he continued to shoot his mouth off like this, he was afraid that he would not be able to keep his life. It might feel good to talk big, but wasn't it more important to stay alive? Placing the documents in his hands on the table in the conference room, Bai Shui paused for a moment to tidy up the papers. He looked at the altar masters of the Blood Garment Pavilion, but his heart was filled with disappointment. Qi Yan was reckless, Ho Tu was stingy, Qing Mu Shouqing, and Rui Jin were short-sighted. Could such an organization, such a group of leaders, really allow the Blood Garment Pavilion to continue? The Blood Garment Pavilion had reached a point where they had no choice but to change. However, the thoughts of this group of people were still unable to change. The Blood Garment Pavilion really needed a person with foresight, wisdom, and means to lead it. Since everyone has already made a decision, then I'm sure that no matter what I say, you won't necessarily listen. Everyone placed the interests of the Blood-clad Pavilion above the balance and made their own decisions. I have nothing to say. I only hope that everyone will remember their own choices. In the future, all the consequences will be your own. Everyone, please take care of yourselves. This is the Blood Garment Pavilion, not Qi Yan Pavilion, Rui Jin Pavilion, Qing Mu Pavilion, or Ho Tu Pavilion. We are an organization, not a loose alliance. It was clear that Bai Shui was truly enraged by everyone's attitude. Thus, he directly spat out such heart-wrenching words. Bai Shui, you? Qing Mu opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something to Bai Shui. However, just as he reached out his hand, Bai Shui directly walked to the door and slammed it shut. In fact, Bai Shui's heart was not that ruthless. If he really wanted to push Nangongja to the top, there was no need to reveal this information to the 5 altar masters. Even if he really wanted to reveal this information, he could have just skipped over it. There was no need to be so angry. However, Bai Shui still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He hoped that he could preserve more of the Blood Garment Pavilion's strength through his own efforts. This was also the fundamental reason why the Jade Water Society had such a huge outburst from their usual calm and unperturbed attitude. He deeply loved the Blood Garment Pavilion. This place was like a pure land for Bai Shui. Bai Shui only hoped that there would never be any war to burn this place. But the threat of Akatsuki organization was so close, but no one was willing to open their eyes and clearly recognize the gap between them and other forces. Bai Shui had completely given up the last glimmer of hope in his heart. Since this was the case, let the enemy come. Use the swords in their hands, and use the blood and lives of countless disciples of Blood Garment Pavilion to wake up these people who were deceiving themselves. As he strode forward, Bai Shui's aquamarine robes fluttered in the wind as he walked. There was an unusual beauty in the coldness. How are the preparations? Conan was wearing the Akatsuki organization's signature black robe with red clouds. Her cold voice resounded, and she said to the person in front of her. The ninja of Akatsuki organization who was half kneeling in front of Conan cupped his hands and said, "Our forces have been assembled, and we can act at any time." According to our information from Woodleaf, Nangongja is still in Woodleaf. It seems that Blood Garment Pavilion is not aware of our actions. Hearing the report of Akatsuki organization's ninja, Conan couldn't help but chuckle twice, as if she had heard something particularly funny. Don't know? How is that possible? A group of self-deceiving people, obviously the truth is in front of them, but they are not willing to accept it. Letting such a group of people lead such a huge force like Blood Garment Pavilion is really a waste. Since they don't know how to cherish it, then we will spare no effort to help them so that these forces can really play their role. Conan said, then turned around and walked away. However, in the jungle behind Conan, there are many hidden places for ninjas to rest. Roughly counting, there were more than 400 or 500 of them. Chapter 226. Hey, did you hear? A few days ago, the Altar Lord hosted an Altar Lord meeting. In the end, those Altar Lords somehow offended the Altar Lord. For the past few days, the Altar Lord has been cooped up in her room and hasn't come out at all. Even when Altar Lord Qing Mu went to console the Altar Lord didn't open the door. Two guards were chatting at the entrance of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Guarding the entrance was extremely boring. Moreover, this was the entrance of a hidden faction like the Blood Garment Pavilion. Normally, no one would come to visit. Among all the jobs that the Blood Garment Pavilion's disciples were responsible for, guarding the entrance was perhaps the most relaxing and boring job. When people had nothing to do, they would start gossiping about things that were out of their reach. As the Altar Lord of the Blood Garment Pavilion's Jade Water Altar, Bai Shui was one of the 5 core members of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Naturally, it was difficult for people to avoid gossiping about her. I've also heard that the Altar Lord has always been known to have a bad temper. However, as long as someone gives the Altar Lord a way out after she loses her temper, she'll usually be fine. I don't know what happened this time to make the Altar Lord so stubborn. Could it be? Before he could finish speaking, a slightly wretched smile appeared on the guard's face. This kind of expression that all men understood made the other guard understand and laugh together. When the two of them were immersed in their own fantasies, the sound of shoes stepping on the ground quietly sounded behind the two of them. Bai Shui wore aqua-green clothes and held a cyan whip in her hand. At this moment, she was smiling at the two guards who were gossiping about her. Sensing the indescribable cold feeling behind them, the two guards stiffly turned around and saw Bai Shui standing behind them. She was their highest leader. She had actually heard them gossiping about her behind her back. The two guards trembled under Bai Shui's smiling gaze. They half knelt on the ground and trembled as they said, "Greetings, Altar Lord Bai Shui." Ha. Hearing the greetings of the two guards, Bai Shui chuckled lightly, like a peony blossoming, brightening up half the world. If it was any other time, the two guards would have bragged to others after seeing such clear water. But now, the two could only tremble like quails. "Didn't you guys laugh so happily whenever you mention me? Why are the two of you so scared when I'm smiling? Keep laughing, it's quite fun when you guys laugh." One of the guards looked at the other guard beside him and gave him a look as if to say, "You started this topic, so you should solve it." The other guard's expression also changed. However, he was the one who was in the wrong in this matter. After glancing at Bai Shui's expression, he could only brace himself and speak. "Altar Master, you must be joking. The two of us didn't know the gravity of the situation. Because the job of guarding the door was really boring, we offended you while we were chatting. Please forgive us, Altar Master." The guard seemed to have some knowledge and spoke in a very organized manner. "Look, I've already apologized so seriously and explained the cause and effect of the matter to you clearly. As an Altar Master, you should still want to save face, right? Since there's a way out, then let's go down properly. This is the entrance of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Once there's trouble, the two of us are just insignificant disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Bai Shui is the Altar Master of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. At that time, who knows who will be the one to lose face?" The guard felt that he was too smart. It was a pity that there was no one in the Blood Clothing Pavilion who knew how to judge people. Otherwise, he would have already made a name for himself. Why would he need to be a miserable gatekeeper and welcome disciple? While the guard was still admiring himself, Bai Shui's face became gloomy. She was already in a bad mood after being rebuffed by the other 4 altar masters of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. She was also very disappointed in the leaders of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Now that she was at the entrance, a gatekeeper disciple of the lowest level actually dared to play tricks on her. The upper echelons were stupid, but the lower echelons were very complacent and full of petty tricks. This Bloodcloth Pavilion was really interesting. She had lived in the Bloodcloth Pavilion for so many years, but she had not seen such things. It was really a dereliction of her duty. "I asked you to laugh. Why are you explaining to me?" Bai Shui's slightly cold words rushed into the gatekeeper disciple's ears. It's over. She had flattered the wrong horse. Not only did it not make Bai Shui feel better, but it also put her in an even more dangerous situation. There was no other way. Since Bai Shui asked them to laugh, they naturally had to laugh. Ha ha. That kind of hoarse, forcibly stifled laughter came out of the two people's mouths. Bai Shui was very upset when he heard this. This was the bloodcloth pavilion. Originally, Bai Shui wanted to properly discipline these two gatekeepers who did not know the severity of the matter. However, at this moment she was not in the mood to do so. People often said that when a person was disappointed, they would not be willing to try anything. Perhaps Bai Shui's current mood towards the bloodcloth pavilion was like this. It gently waved its sleeves, and the aqua-green sleeves fluttered in the air with the force of the water. It was as ethereal as the clouds in the sky. If its owner could have such a mood like it, it would be great. The conflict at the entrance quickly reached the ears of the 4 altar masters of the Blood Garment Pavilion. When Qi Yan heard this, he only felt a burst of fear. At that time, if he had not stood on the side with the advantage in numbers, perhaps he would have been properly disciplined by Bai Shui. When Ho Tu heard this, he only scratched his head. The two gatekeepers were the ones who had been rude first. In that case, it was fine for Bai Shui to teach them a lesson. After all, they did not cause any harm. When Aoki heard this, he gently placed an old book in his hand on the table in front of him. He sighed slightly and didn't say anything. When Ruijin heard this, he did not react at all. He still minded his own business and wiped the long sword in his hand. It was as if the long sword was the only thing he should pay attention to. Chapter 227. Bai Shui maintained a look of anger as he walked into his room. However, the moment Bai Shui entered the room, all the anger on his face disappeared. It was as if the anger had never existed in the first place. How is it? A man's voice came from Bai Shui's room. Nangong's figure came out from behind a screen and said to Bai Shui with a bit of ridicule. That's right, Nangongzhe was actually in the headquarters of Bloodcloth Pavilion at this moment. When Nangongzhe came to know that Akatsuki organization was most likely going to attack Bloodrobe Pavilion, he had already entered Bloodrobe Pavilion through Clearwater Altar. Everyone knew Nangongzhe's temperament and natural disposition. He had always disliked things like ninjutsu, so many people subconsciously ignored the possibility of Nangongzhe being impersonated in Woodleaf. Nangongzhe took advantage of such a big blind spot and made Nangong Ro temporarily come out from Lion Clan's different space and enter Woodleaf. Nangong Ro could use ninjutsu, not to mention transformation jutsu, this kind of low-level ninjutsu. She could easily use it. Nangongzhe and Nangong Ro had lived together for so many years, so they knew each other's small habits and small movements very well. Making Nangong Ro dress up as Nangongzhe to confuse other people's line of sight was really not difficult. This simple trick of stealing the sky and swapping the sun actually deceived everyone. This was very interesting. Bai Shui shook her head and said with a bit of disappointment, "It's still the same. Still the same." The people of the Blood Garment Pavilion all closed their eyes and ears, unwilling to accept the fact that they had become the prey of others. They are still minding their own business and playing very happily. They didn't take my warning to heart. Even though I've been deliberately throwing tantrums these past 2 days and finding fault with them from time to time, the people of Blood Garment Pavilion still haven't come to their senses. It seems that bloodshed is unavoidable this time. In fact, Nangongzhe had already guessed the reaction of the blood-robed pavilion. Such a hidden force naturally couldn't be compared to some of the forces in the shinobi world. This long period of peace and stability has obliterated their sense of crisis. Perhaps, if you want them to truly put down their attitude and treat the entire ninja world with an equal attitude, you really need a real sting to do it, right? Then, do you have any guesses about the person who destroyed my home? Nangongzhe asked the question that he had been wanting to ask for a long time. The operation record that Bai Shui gave him clearly stated that the person who led a group of ninjas to exterminate Nangongzhe's village was the Altar Lord of Scarlet Flame Altar, Scarlet Flame. But after observing for so long, whether it was Nangongzhe or Bai Shui, They felt that Scarlet Flame wasn't the person who brazenly took action to snatch the Heaven's Disaster Sword. If Scarlet Flame really had such a scheming heart and ambition, then this operation record would not have been recorded so clearly. This was simply leaving behind the biggest weakness for him to use against Scarlet Flame. Therefore, for the past 3 years, Nangongzhe and Bai Shui have been searching inside Bloodcloth Pavilion to find out who instigated Scarlet Flame to do such a crazy act. Although I didn't directly determine the target, it still made me set my eyes on 2 people. The one who can instigate Scarlet Flame must be one of the 5 altar lords of Bloodcloth Pavilion. I and Scarlet Flame can be excluded for the time being. Aoki is already very old. Even when the village was massacred, Aoki was already old, so there is no motive for him to take the risk to snatch the Heaven's Disaster Sword at such an age. So only Ho Tu and Rue Jin are the most suspicious. These 2 people are very low-key. Even if I have worked with them for many years, I still haven't seen their true faces. Maybe we still have to wait for Bloodcloth Pavilion to be attacked by Akatsuki organization and see who will reveal the truth? Ho Tu had always been simple and honest, and Rue Jin was also extremely low-key outside of battle. They were completely different from Scarlet Flame, so people simply couldn't see the real intention of these 2 people. Nangongzhe had already told Bai Shui before that Akatsuki organization had wanted to win him over. So the one among the 5 altar lords who had disloyal intentions would absolutely not let go of such an opportunity. As long as there was a suitable opportunity, he would certainly reveal the truth. This was the time for Nangongzhe to clean up Bloodcloth Pavilion and truly take charge of Bloodcloth Pavilion. Fortunately, Big Sister has always taken care of me. Otherwise, I would really be blind in this blood-clothing pavilion. Nangongzhe actually called Bai Shui sister, but it wasn't a big deal. The expression on their faces made people feel that all of this was natural. As we have said before, in Bloodcloth Pavilion, once one inherits the position of Altar Lord, he will change his name, and the name of the Altar Lord will be his own name. Bai Shui was not a native disciple of Bloodcloth Pavilion. There were still many internal energy cultivation inheritances scattered in the ninja world outside Bloodcloth Pavilion. Bai Shui was originally chosen by the previous Altar Lord of Bai Shui Altar because of her talent, and was accepted as a disciple, and then naturally inherited the position of Altar Lord of Bai Shui Altar. Many people did not know that this Altar Lord of Bai Shui Altar of Bloodcloth Pavilion, before inheriting the position of Altar Lord, her surname was Nangong. According to seniority, Bai Shui was the sister of Nangongzhe and Nangongro. It's nothing, although you and I are not related by blood. But you have inherited the mantle of the old man, and have been protecting my sister, so you are one of us. There is nothing to hesitate about helping you. I only hope that you can be more outstanding, and make the old man's sacrifice worth it. All the fog had been quietly lifted at this moment. Why was Bai Shui so clear about the matter of Nangongzhe's village being massacred? Why was Bai Shui so active in showing goodwill to Nangongzhe as an altar lord when Nangongzhe had just inherited the position of Bloodcloth Pavilion's head? Why was Bai Shui willing to listen to Nangongzhe's orders when the 5 altar lords of Bloodcloth Pavilion had decided to make Nangongzhe a mere figurehead? Everything was because Bai Shui and Nangongro were blood relatives. When Nangongro's grandfather and Nangongro were being chased and attacked, Bai Shui did not know. But when she understood the reason, she quietly kept everything in her heart. When Nangongzhe became the head, Bai Shui naturally stood up to support Nangongzhe, who had a deep relationship with her. When the relationship between the two was made clear, they were bound together for good or ill. If Nangongzhe could become stronger and more powerful, it would be of great significance to Bai Shui. Chapter 228. Outside the gate of the blood-robed pavilion, there was a huge forest. The huge forest was the best defensive place for the blood-robed pavilion. For generations, the blood-robed pavilion had actively arranged various lines of defense and defensive facilities in the forest, and there were many open and hidden sentries. These were all built by the blood-robed pavilion for basic defense, but in recent years, the members of the blood-robed pavilion had gradually dispersed, leaving only Aoki Altar and a small number of the other 4-5 elements altars in the headquarters of the blood-robed pavilion. With so many lines of defense and so many sentries, there were not enough people to guard them, resulting in less than 1 out of 10 places that still played a role. And on this day, the few sentries of the blood-robed pavilion were attacked by the enemy. Report: our personnel have arrived at the designated location. The sentries of the blood-robed pavilion have been monitored by our personnel. A person wearing the uniform of the Akatsuki organization suddenly appeared in the big tent where the Akatsuki organization attacked the blood-robed pavilion. In every war, the first thing to do is to eliminate the eyes and ears of the opponent. The sentries of the blood-robed pavilion in the forest were the eyes and ears of the blood-robed pavilion. When Conan led the members of the Akatsuki organization to the forest in front of the gate of the blood-robed pavilion, she made great efforts to find the sentries of the blood-robed pavilion. This time, Zetsu, Deidara, and Sasori came with Conan to the blood-robed pavilion. Among the 3 of them, there was an extremely powerful intelligence-gathering ability. Deidara's explosive clay had excellent power in a group battle. Sasori himself was good at puppet jutsu, and his powerful red secret jutsu, 100 machine manipulation, was extremely powerful. This time, the Akatsuki organization dispatched nearly 2,000 people in order to defeat the blood-robed pavilion in an extremely short period of time and absorb the power of the blood-robed pavilion before all the ninja villages noticed it. Very good. Conan nodded, looked at the sun in the sky, thought for a moment, and then said, "Inform all ninjas, get ready. Attack the blood-robed pavilion at 2 o'clock in the morning tonight." Yes. The ninjas of the Akatsuki organization responded and then left the tent. Conan also turned her gaze to Sasori and Deidara, who were also standing in the big tent. "Have you understood the intelligence of the main forces of the blood-robed pavilion?" Sasori put down the information in his hand, and Deidara also woke up a little from his lazy state. Naturally, Sasori himself was hidden inside the puppet jutsu, but when he was inside the puppet jutsu, his voice would change, and his voice was a little hoarse and low. Blood-robed pavilion's jutsu, jutsu redness, and thick, these 5 elements of the 5 elements altars. Their altar masters used the names of their altars as their names. The sharp gold altar was the combat department of the blood garment pavilion, and it was especially good at surprise attacks. Aller is a master swordsmanship master. Part row pavilion is sword, according to the swordsman of the swordsman sword pavilion. The greenwood altar was part of the logistics department of the blood garment pavilion. Most of them were not strong in battle, but they were good at medicine. His was master, his master, he was master, and he. The Jadewater altar was the intelligence department of the blood clothing pavilion and also the assassination department. All the disciples of the Jadewater altar were experts in stealth and assassination. Aquamarine altar lord was good at using the soft whip technique. The whip was an extremely rare weapon in the ninja world, and the soft whip was even more strange and often impossible to guard against. The Scarlet Flame altar was the combat department of the blood garment pavilion. It was mainly responsible for attacking. Its combat power was astonishing. Moreover, when it fought, there was a strange fanatical atmosphere. As the altar lord of the Scarlet Flame altar, Scarlet Flame's fanaticism had reached its peak. The long saber in his hand was extremely lethal. It was even said that the more injured he was, the more powerful he would become. The thick earth altar was mainly responsible for defense in the blood cloak pavilion. It also served as the vanguard in battles. The strength of the deep earth altar's altar lord wasn't very clear, but to be able to lead such an army, he must be very powerful. The thick earth altar's disciples are mostly responsible for the defense of the forest. Scorpion explained the blood-clad pavilion's information. From time to time, he would add in some of his own opinions. After saying that, Scorpion couldn't help but sigh. These people are all good materials for making puppets. Unlike ninjas who rely on chakra, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were all people who cultivated internal energy. Their bodies were extremely strong. For Scorpion, these disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were indeed the best materials for making his own eternal art. Daedara curled his lips and said with a slight sigh and sarcasm, "This blood cloak pavilion dared to claim to be a hidden force. Just like that, we were able to get a clear picture of him. What a waste. Could it be that we have planted our own people in the blood clothing pavilion to obtain such detailed information?" As soon as Daedara's words came out, Conan and Scorpion turned their eyes to Daedara. That kind of look was clearly as if their idiot suddenly became enlightened and used his brain. They were very pleased. Hey, what's with that look? Although I don't know what you are thinking, it must be something very rude. Don't look at me like that. Be careful of this uncle giving you an artistic explosion. Sure enough, his idiot was still an idiot. Only eternity is true art. Explosions like yours are simply unorthodox and unorthodox. Scorpion began to talk about his own artistic views with Daedara. After 3 years of run-in, the relationship between Scorpion and Daedara was still as incompatible as ever. Every time Daedara began to talk about his own explosion art, Scorpion would satirize that Daedara's art was not real art at all. Only his art of making living people into puppets was real art. Scorpion, you bastard. Believe it or not, this uncle will let you have a good taste of the power of this uncle's cute little spider explosion, and let you really understand what art is. You can try. Scorpion's voice was still low and hoarse, making people feel very uncomfortable. Conan also subconsciously pressed her hand on her forehead. It seemed that she also regretted bringing a pair of clowns like Daedara and Scorpion to such an important operation. Chapter 229. In fact, bringing Sasori and Daedara to such an operation was really a helpless move. Not long ago, Itachi and Orochimaru, who didn't see eye to eye with each other, had a fierce fight with each other. After that, no one knew what Orochimaru was thinking. He actually directly took off the uniform of Akatsuki and defected from the organization. This was the first time since the establishment of Akatsuki that a senior member defected from the organization. After this incident, Pain had to leave Akatsuki to pursue Orochimaru, because Orochimaru was responsible for a lot of confidential research tasks of Akatsuki. Such information was naturally taken away by Orochimaru when he left. Such a person must not be easily let go. Otherwise, where would the dignity of Akatsuki be placed? Therefore, Itachi Uchiha, Kisame, and Pain, who were supposed to attack Blood-Clothed Pavilion with Zetsu and Conan, went to chase Orochimaru. But ninjas have been assembled, and such a laborious operation can't be abandoned. Therefore, Conan could only take Sasori and Daedara as backup forces to attack Blood-Clothed Pavilion. Of course, Sasori and Daedara were not randomly chosen. Since Akatsuki had the information of Blood-Clothed Pavilion, they have been making plans to annex it. People who practice internal force do have slightly higher combat power than ninjas of the same level, but most of them are straightforward and don't have the ability to attack a group. Therefore, Sasori and Daedara are naturally the best choices as AoE attackers. Not to mention Daedara's aerial combat ability and Sasori's strange puppet manipulation method. Time passed quietly, and in the blink of an eye, it was already the sun setting in the west and the moon rising in the east. The bright moon was hanging in the sky, naturally exuding a slightly cold light. Late at night, a breeze blew through the forest from time to time, bringing the smell of grass into people's nostrils. It wasn't that exciting. Instead, it made people feel especially tired and sleepy. They wanted to sleep to get rid of the tiredness in their bodies. In a secret post of Blood-Clothed Pavilion, there were 4 disciples of Blood-Clothed Pavilion who were responsible for keeping watch at night. Blood-Clothed Pavilion has always been very stable, and no one dares to break in. So the job of keeping watch at night gradually became a means of punishment for disobedient disciples. Among the 4, one of them was quite old. He was the leader of the group when they were on night watch. The older disciple was from the deep earth altar of the Blood-Cloak Pavilion. The other 3 disciples were from different 5 elemental altars. Due to some mistakes, they were punished to be on night watch here. Looking at the youngest disciple of the Blood-Clothing Pavilion, who was nestled in the corner, who looked dizzy and could no longer stay up, the older disciple of the thick earth altar smiled. His child was about the same age as this young disciple. Looking at this young disciple, the Deep Earth Altar's disciple could not help but think of his wife and child who lived in the Blood Garment Pavilion's headquarters. As for the remaining 2 Blood Garment Pavilion disciples, they were squatting together and playing some card game. Occasionally, one of them would be very excited after winning, while the one who lost would be very unwilling to give up and would clamor for another round. The night, especially in such a quiet forest, was always very long. Even the Deep Earth Altar's night watcher couldn't take it anymore. He gently closed his eyes, intending to take a nap for a while. Accompanied by the noise of the 2 Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples, the older disciple of the Deep Earth Altar slowly fell asleep. He faintly seemed to have heard something wrong, but he was still defeated by tiredness. But the neck of the older disciple was very cold. It seemed that some liquid was constantly seeping out from the side of his neck. His body temperature continued to drop along with the flow of the liquid. Finally, the life of the older disciple quietly passed away. However, there was a peaceful look on his face, as if he had lost his life in a beautiful dream. The originally warm hidden sentry post had become very bloody with the loss of 4 lives. The blood all over the ground seemed to prove that these 4 lives had left a little mark in this world. The people of Akatsuki organization were standing outside the door of the hidden sentry post. Their leader gently lifted a paper crane in his hand, then injected a little chakra into the paper crane to activate the transcribed technique. After that, the paper crane slowly flew towards the big tent of Akatsuki organization. Looking back at the house of the hidden sentry post, he very contemptuously said, "Such an organization, such a group of people, we actually need to mobilize so much power to subdue them. If you ask me, it would be better to let all of our senior members come to the entrance of this Blood Robe Pavilion and let out their imposing manner. Then this group of Blood Robe Pavilion's soft feet shrimps might directly kowtow and cry and shout to join our Akatsuki organization." After hearing such words, other people of Akatsuki organization also laughed. Originally, they all thought that this Blood Cloak Pavilion must be the strongest enemy they had ever encountered. But when they attacked the hidden sentry post tonight, they discovered that the quality of these Blood Cloak Pavilion people was really bad. As the night watchmen, they actually didn't have any vigilance. 2 people slept and 2 people played. The ninjas of Akatsuki organization quietly blew some hypnotic smoke into the small house of the hidden sentry post, and this group of people also directly fell into the trap. The funny thing was that the person who seemed to be the leader of these 4 people actually didn't react at all, and was directly killed by them. That happy smile on his face was simply the funniest thing that these ninjas of Akatsuki organization had ever seen after becoming ninjas. Many paper cranes flew towards the big tent of Akatsuki organization and were received by the ninjas of Akatsuki organization who were responsible for collecting information. From time to time, the person who reported the information opened his mouth and talked about the progress of the operation. Left sector cleared completely. Right sector cleared completely. Front sector cleared completely. Rear sector cleared completely. A ninja of Akatsuki organization arrived in front of Conan, then cupped his hands and said to Conan, "Report, our elimination plan has been carried out smoothly. All the hidden sentry posts in the 4 sectors have been completely eliminated, and so far no flaw has been found." Xiao Nen smiled faintly. She didn't find any flaws. What a pleasant surprise. Chapter 230. The plan is always an idealized way of thinking because everything is changing. All the elements that you have calculated are always changing. No matter how perfect your plan is, it will be difficult to avoid some omissions. Just like now, Akatsuki organization was carrying out the plan to clean up all the hidden sentries of Bloodclothed Pavilion. If 1 or 2 hidden sentries were not successfully eliminated, or if 1 or 2 disciples of Bloodclothed Pavilion escaped from the hidden sentries, it was completely within Conan's acceptable range, but now everything was going smoothly, which made Conan feel very wrong. However, after taking a closer look at the personnel arrangement of each sentry post and the number of beheaded heads reported by each squad, there was not a single flaw. Conan could only gently support her forehead with her hand. Don't know if the quality of Akatsuki Organization's people is very high or because the quality of Bloodcloth Pavilion's people is pitifully low. Unexpectedly, this kind of strange situation can appear. But Conan still extricated herself from such strange thoughts, because now she was in the middle of the battlefield. Everything is changing rapidly, since her side has grasped such a big advantage, then naturally she can't easily let it go. He waved his sleeves and expelled all the messy thoughts from his mind. Conan's face was cold, and her temperament was like that of an ice queen, as she lightly opened her red lips. Inform Jade Maiden and Azure Dragon, the plan is advanced. Now take your subordinates to the headquarters of Bloodcloth Pavilion, and begin to slowly nibble away at Bloodcloth Pavilion. From outside to inside, slowly wear down the strength of Bloodcloth Pavilion. Try not to expose your existence. If you are exposed, it doesn't matter. I will always be in the rear. Conan very calmly gave the order. But then she turned her eyes and said to the ninja who gave the order, especially tell Jade Maiden to keep a close watch on Azure Dragon. Don't let him casually use his explosive clay. The impact is really too big. After our side is exposed, then allow Azure Dragon to fully use his explosive clay. Azure Dragon was Daidara's code name, and Jade Maiden was Sasori's code name. In such an official operation, she still had to call each member by their code name. Conan's impression of Daidara was really not so good, so she can't let Daidara directly use his art in a moment of hot-bloodedness. That will make things more complicated. So Conan told her people to let Sasori keep a close watch on Daidara. Conan's order was also quickly conveyed to Daidara and Sasori, who have been preparing for war. Although the two of them were a little puzzled about the advance implementation of the plan, since the order has been issued, then naturally they will comply with it. Although Daidara and Sasori are nominally the commanders of the battle, but in fact, both of them are pure ninjas. In such a large-scale battle, they really don't have any talent for commanding the battle, so in fact, there are specialized people in charge of commanding the combat ninjas of Akatsuki Organization, and Daidara and Sasori are more like people who assist from the side. Daidara's of blood of his hands, hands of Daidara's of his hands, and white explosive clays of his hands of blood of his hands, palms of his mouth. After a while, the clay has turned into the shape of a giant bird. After Daidara made a few hand seals, chakra continuously poured into the explosive clay to activate the clay giant bird. Sasori. Let's go. Let's use facts to prove whose art is more gorgeous and colorful. Daidara seemed to remember Sasori's words of saying that his explosion is not art. So he turned his head and looked at Sasori provocatively. And Sasori's unique low and hoarse voice also said, "Naive." Daidara was not angry because Daidara felt that he could feel it. Although Sasori's tone was full of disdain, but Sasori was actually excited at the moment. For this battle, Sasori also began to be interested. After all, this is a person who has been doing missions with him for 3 years, so they are still very familiar with each other. Ha ha ha. Deadale laughed as he grabbed Fei Liuhu's tail and placed Scorpion on top of a giant clay bird. You're so cold. To think I was so excited. Looking at Daidara's shameless appearance, Sasori also closed his mouth. If he quarreled with Daidara again, maybe some strange words will come out of this idiot's mouth. Then, fly. When Daidara said this sentence, the clay giant bird under Sasori and Daidara seemed to have received the order and directly flapped its wings and flew up. It was late at night, except for a little bit of moonlight and starlight. It can be said that it was still dark. But in such an environment, when the white clay bird appeared in the sky, it didn't seem abrupt at all. Obviously, Daidara knew that he was going to fight at night, so he used a little trick to make the color of the explosive clay more atomized and not so easy to be noticed. Flying in the air, looking at the ninjas of Akatsuki Organization below, they began to gather. Slowly advancing towards the location of the headquarters of Bloodcloak Pavilion, Daidara suddenly felt an indescribable sense of heroism coming out from his heart. He wanted to howl at the sky first. Seeing Daidara's strange look, Sasori also followed Daidara's gaze and looked at his body. Although there was the obstruction of the woods with Sasori's eyesight, he could easily see the ninjas of Akatsuki Organization moving forward in the woods. That kind of crowded scene, that kind of feeling with iron blood and murderous aura, It really makes it difficult for any man to suppress the hot-bloodedness in his heart to participate. But it's a pity. Sasori is not a human. Although he has a human heart as his power core, but because his body was transformed into a puppet, Sasori seems to have unconsciously lost some human characteristics. In the face of many things, Sasori will feel that his emotional fluctuations seem to be a little too thin. This is a good thing for his eternal art research, Sasori told himself again and again. However, Scorpio couldn't help but bicker with Dead Ale, who looked a little chinibu and a little silly. Perhaps this is the reason why Sasori subconsciously wants to maintain the attitude of a human. Chapter 231. Most of the disciples of Greenwood Altar were left behind to guard the headquarters of Bloodrobe Pavilion, and only a few disciples of other altars were left behind to guard the headquarters of Bloodrobe Pavilion. Most of these people were too young or too old and didn't have much fighting strength. But this couldn't dispel Akatsuki Organization's plan to attack Bloodrobe Pavilion, because now all the altars of Bloodrobe Pavilion were already gathered in the headquarters of Bloodrobe Pavilion. Once Akatsuki Organization captured the headquarters of Bloodrobe Pavilion, then it would be equivalent to capturing the entire spiritual belief of Bloodrobe Pavilion. When those disciples of Bloodrobe Pavilion lost their effective command, coupled with the assistance of the people of Bloodrobe Pavilion who supported Akatsuki Organization to enter Bloodrobe Pavilion, it wouldn't be difficult to control the entire Bloodrobe Pavilion. A tall Nepenthes plant slowly emerged behind Conan, and Ju's extremely recognizable face was also revealed from the Nepenthes plant. Notify all the members who are planning to attack Bloodrobe Pavilion. Start the attack now. Conan glanced at the moon in the sky and judged the current time. Now was the time when most people were sleeping, and even if some people weren't sleeping, their mental state had already fallen to a low point. Once someone invaded, and the speed of invasion was extremely fast, then their reaction speed would be greatly weakened. This was a good opportunity to weaken the strength of Bloodrobe Pavilion, so Conan naturally had to grasp it. Ju, are you sure you don't want to participate in the operation? After issuing the order, Ju was just about to enter the ground again, when Conan couldn't help but ask, as White Tiger, you should know my situation. I am not good at fighting people. I am still responsible for passing on information. Spying on the enemy's situation is better, Ju's tone was slightly frivolous, and when it reached the ears of people, it always made people slightly uncomfortable in their heart. Could be said that Ju had joined Akatsuki Organization relatively early, but Conan felt as if she had never seen through such a person. That feeling of vigilance and suspicion had never been eliminated in Conan's heart. Oh, is that so? Since you don't want to fight, there's no harm. In any case, the outcome of this war is already decided. Just do your job well. Hearing Ju's refusal, Conan didn't seem to take it to heart. It was as if the proposal just a moment ago was just casually said. Since Ju was unwilling, then there was nothing wrong with it. Hearing Conan's words, the corners of Ju's mouth raised to form a strange smile. If others saw that black face, then maybe because of such a strange smile, it would leave a shadow. The Nepenthes once again integrated into the ground. Obviously, Zetsu had already left to convey Conan's attack order to all the Akatsuki's ninjas who were responsible for the frontline command. The Bloodrobe Pavilion's buildings were in a circle. In the outermost circle's pavilion, the Robe Pavilion's palace, Pavilion's disciples. Be pavilion, blood. Relying on the quality of the ninjas of Akatsuki Organization, as well as their unintentional actions, Akatsuki Organization very quickly and quietly sneaked into the encampment of Bloodcloak Pavilion. Quietly begin. Obviously, there was no sound of fighting, but there was still a faint smell of blood spreading all around. Although the 4 altar lords of Bloodrobe Pavilion didn't agree with Bishue's proposal, but such a matter still occupied a certain position in their hearts, so they still maintained the most basic vigilance. Although the smell of blood was very weak, Akatsuki's people were also very careful when they started. But in the end, the loss of life couldn't be easily covered up. Who dares to commit murder in my Bloodrobe Pavilion? A slightly rough voice suddenly resounded in the silent night, and the one who spoke was Scarlet Flame, Altar Lord of Bloodrobe Pavilion. As a person who often faced battles, Scarlet Flame was more sensitive to the smell of blood than others. TSK. Sure enough, we were discovered, but fortunately our results are not small. Hearing Scarlet Flame's roar, Deidara secretly smacked his lips. But soon Deidara's face revealed a fanatical smile. So what if they found out? Sasori has been staring at me, not letting me show off my outstanding art to this group of Bloodrobe Pavilion country bumpkins. Isn't this the right time? Before this, Akatsuki's ninjas had almost destroyed 1/10 of Bloodrobe Pavilion's buildings. Although there weren't many high-level combatants among them, they still had enough battle results. Sure enough, the battle should be more intense. Quietly wiping out all the enemies like this is really not my way of doing things. I want to perfectly show this group of Bloodrobe Pavilion country bumpkins my art. On Deidara's face, the smile became more and more crazy. He glanced at Sasori, who was on top of the clay giant bird next to him, but found that Sasori had already jumped down from the clay giant bird without him knowing. At this moment, Sasori was constantly falling from mid-air. He didn't know when Sasori had transformed a part of Philiu. From the shoulder blade of Philiu, a pair of wings actually extended. Although it couldn't make Philiu fly in the air, but it greatly reduced the falling speed of Philiu, playing the role of a parachute. Sasori. This guy actually sneaked away. Seeing that Sasori had secretly jumped down from the clay giant bird, Deidara felt that he couldn't do nothing. He put his hand into the cloth bag on his waist, and the explosive clay in the cloth bag was constantly swallowed by the mouth in his palm. Sensing the mouth in his palm, he estimated that the explosive clay was almost ready. Deidara opened his hands and stretched them in front of his body. The mouth in his palm constantly spat out small birds made of explosive clay. After each small bird was spat out by the mouth, it continued to fly forward. The clay giant bird that Sasori had been sitting on was like a leader, leading countless small birds to the battlefield below. Chi Yan's roar caused the countless disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion to react, and the situation on the battlefield gradually became more and more anxious. Small birds continued to fly into the crowd, and the sound of explosions was endless. Chapter 232. Who dares to invade my blood-robed pavilion? Aoki was also awakened by the sounds of battle outside his door. He hadn't experienced such a large-scale battle for a long time. Most of the people in the headquarters of Bloodrobe Pavilion were disciples of Aoki Altar, and he had watched them grow up. Aoki looked at his nephews lying in a pool of blood one by one, and his sad voice resounded through the 9 heavens. Ah! You people, I will let you see the power of Blood-Robed Pavilion. Holding a huge dragon-head wooden staff in his hand, Aoki also joined the battle. Although the strength of Akatsuki's people was pretty good, but they were still a bit lacking when facing Aoki. Occasionally, Aoki glanced at other places and saw Ruejin, Ho-Tu, and Akatsuki were resisting the sudden attack of powerful enemies. Sure enough, was what Bishui said true? Akatsuki really gathered 2,000 ninjas to attack Blood-Robed Pavilion. Although the number of people in Blood-Robed Pavilion was not less than 2,000. But Aoki was very clear about how many of them were old, weak, sick, and disabled. Even most of the young and middle-aged people in Aoki Altar were not very proficient in fighting. Could such a battle really go on? When Aoki was still asking himself, a dark green poisonous needle quietly shot towards Aoki. There was no time to think so much. Since the battle had already begun, it was useless to be upset, so he had to face the enemy properly. Aoki waved his dragon-head wooden staff, and the poisonous needle directly fell to the ground. Looking in the direction where the poison needle came from, a bloated person wearing a red cloud on a black background was standing there. A huge scroll was placed in front of Scorpion. Scorpion, who was hiding in Philiu, who made a hand seal and released the puppets he had sealed in the scroll. A rough count revealed that there were over 100 of these puppets. Strands of chakra condensed into chakra threads connected to each of the puppets. And one by one, the puppets began to attack the people near Sasori with their sharp weapons all over their body. Puppeteer? Ching Mu was very old and could be considered to be very knowledgeable. Although there weren't many puppeteers in Sunagakure, Aoki had seen some of them. An ordinary puppeteer could control 3 or 4 puppets at the same time, and that was already not bad. However, the puppet master in front of him was able to control hundreds of puppets with ease as if they were his own limbs. Such a person, a piece of information kept flashing in Aoki's mind. Such a person could only be the genius puppeteer who betrayed the Sand Ninja, Sasori of the Red Sand, who had such strength. That's right, this was the Crimson Secret technique that the Scorpion of the Crimson Sand had once used to wipe out an entire country, the 100 Machine Demonstration. Seeing one life after another being taken away by the puppets before his eyes, Greenwood's grip on his dragon-headed wooden staff tightened. The inner strength in his body surged, and with a shake of his ankle, he shot towards the red sand scorpion like an arrow. Sasori obviously didn't expect that Aoki's old and decayed body could burst out such a powerful force in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Aoki was already in front of Sasori. He raised his dragon-headed wooden staff high and smashed it with great force towards Sasori. Sasori hurriedly controlled Hiryu, who to use his tail to block the attack. The moment the dragon-headed wooden staff and the tail collided, the sound of metal and stone colliding was heard. Sasori didn't know what material the tail was made of, but it was extraordinarily strong. However, when the dragon-headed wooden staff and the tail collided, a huge shockwave was generated, and the hat on Sasori's head was blown away. Seeing Hiryu, whose appearance, Aoki couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Isn't he too ugly? There were only 3 strands of hair on his head, and his body was short and stout. Comparing the information he saw about Sasori, was this person really Sasori of the Crimson Sand? You must be a disciple of Sasori of the Sand Village, right? Sasori wasn't young, so it should be possible for him to accept a disciple, right? After all, Hiryu, whose appearance and Sasori's appearance were a bit different. The person in front of him could only be described as eyesore. Sasori didn't answer Aoki's question. Instead, he controlled Hiryu, who to constantly shoot poisonous needles from his body, trying to force Aoki away. Facing the dense poisonous needles, Aoki couldn't resist and could only constantly wave his dragon-headed wooden staff to block the poisonous needles flying towards him. Under Sasori's control, 100 puppets were divided into 2 teams, one of which had 70 puppets surrounding Aoki and constantly attacking him. The remaining 30 puppets were under Sasori's control, either cooperating with Akatsuki's ninjas or attacking the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples in pairs. Greenwood, on the other hand, could only barely prevent himself from being attacked by the 70 puppets. He didn't have any more energy to spare. They could only watch helplessly as the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion were slaughtered one after another. The situation on the side of Akatsuki, Ruijin, and Thick Earth wasn't optimistic. There was a man with long golden hair in the sky constantly throwing some exploding clay birds. These clay birds were constantly attacking the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples, and there were also many small birds attacking the Blood Cloak Pavilion's buildings. To be honest, these 3 altar lords didn't have any long-range attack means. They only had internal force but no sword chi, so they couldn't use sword chi to cause long-range damage like Nangongja. One by one, they were like firefighters, constantly running in the Blood Cloak Pavilion's front line. Keeping the front line from collapsing was already exhausting. Nangongja and Bishui were standing in the Blood Cloak Pavilion's iconic attic at this moment, watching the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples being killed one after another. This time, whether we win or lose, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's vitality will be greatly damaged. Nangongja couldn't help but slightly sigh, but it was only a slight sigh. Nangongja had seen many battlefields that were more intense than this, so he didn't feel particularly sad. It doesn't matter, although the Blood Cloak Pavilion's vitality will be greatly damaged this time, but it will also stimulate all their hidden potential. The Blood Cloak Pavilion should never be an alliance of a group of weaklings, but should be more proactive and aggressive, fully showing their muscles to the ninja world. Bishui looked at the blood cloak of the former banishment elder hanging in the attic's hall, and said very cruelly, but it was inevitable that some unbearable feelings flashed in his eyes. This is the blood cloak pavilion. Chapter 233. The sounds of killing and the final roars of life could be heard. Life was splattered on the ground along with the life of the dead. Qing Mu, Qi Yan, Rui Jin, and Ho Tu, the 4 altar lords of the Blood Robe Pavilion, saw all of this with their own eyes. They were anxious and angry, and they wished that they could save more of their disciples. But they could only see puppets launching fierce attacks towards them from all around. And from time to time, clay figurines were thrown down from the sky. They suddenly discovered that bloodcloth pavilion, which they were very proud of and had always been very confident in, was so weak in front of such power. This is our bloodcloth pavilion? No. Bloodcloth pavilion should not be like this. Bloodcloth pavilion should never be a lamb to be slaughtered. Our Qi Yan altar, our Rui Jin altar, our Ho Tu altar, these are our most powerful forces, but they are not here at this moment. If all of our forces were here, then how could we have fallen into such a situation? I regret it. If they had really listened to Bai Shui's suggestion, then Bloodcloth Pavilion would not be in such a passive situation at this moment. We are still a group of proud tigers and leopards. We are definitely not such lambs. Bai Shui had not appeared from beginning to end, and everyone knew that Bai Shui was inside Bloodcloth Pavilion. But perhaps it was because she was hurt too much? Bai Shui had not shown her figure. This is also good. At least if all 4 altar masters of 5 elements altar were to die here, then there would be one person who could command the overall situation, so that Bloodcloth Pavilion would not fall into the most dangerous situation. Qing Mu was thinking like this, and other 3 altar masters were also thinking like this, because in this situation, even if Bai Shui really appeared, she would not be able to do much. No matter how proficient she was in using whip, how could she fight against dozens of fearless puppets who were besieging her? And how could she fight against enemies who were hovering in the sky? But Bloodcloth Pavilion had already lost a lot of people, and the number of dead and seriously injured people had already reached the level of 60%. But at this time, all the people of Akatsuki organization unexpectedly began to slowly withdraw from the battlefield. Quick, 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 everyone, rescue the injured people around you as soon as possible. When Qing Mu discovered that Akatsuki organization had begun to withdraw, he did not even think about it, and immediately began to rescue the injured. These people could not be allowed to die. These people were the young disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, the future hope of the Blood Garment Pavilion. They could not be buried here. The people of Akatsuki organization gradually gathered together and stood in a huge square formation. Deidara, who was hovering in the sky, and Sasori, who was controlling the puppets, also returned to Akatsuki's formation. Chien, Ho Tu, and Rui Jin also arrived in front of Greenwood. The 4 of them stood in a row. Some of the surviving disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion also brought some of the wounded who could still be saved behind them. From time to time, painful howls could be heard from behind them. The contrast between both sides was very obvious. Although Akatsuki organization didn't have any excited roar, but everyone's eyes carried a kind of pride that was difficult to disperse. This is our organization. This is our strength. The people of Blood Garment Pavilion didn't have time to pay attention to the mental appearance of Akatsuki organization's people, because almost all of them were trying their best to rescue the wounded on their side. If they hesitated for a moment, then their life might be lost. Not to mention mourning everywhere, but everyone's eyes were filled with deep sadness. Qi Yan, Rui Jin, Ho Tu, and Qing Mu, who were closely watching Akatsuki organization's formation, also had gloomy expression. Akatsuki organization already occupied an extremely big advantage. As long as they were willing, after paying a very small price, the headquarters of Blood Garment Pavilion would be directly annihilated. Even if these altar masters were lucky enough to preserve their lives, but they could only run away like stray dogs. But now Akatsuki organization didn't attack, and abandoned their advantage, so naturally it was because they had a bigger scheme, wasn't it? Suddenly a figure appeared in the sky. Behind her, there was a pair of snow-white wings. No, those wings were not composed of feathers, rather a pair of wings made of white paper. God's emissary, Akatsuki's white tiger Conan, had arrived at the battlefield. Conan controlled the wings behind her back to slowly descend, and stood in front of the ninjas of Akatsuki organization. Her eyes were looking straight at the 4 altar masters of Blood Garment Pavilion, but she was so calm, as if she was looking at ants. God summoned you to our embrace. Conan lightly opened her mouth, and her cold voice under the support of chakra instantly resounded throughout the entire battlefield. God? The people of Blood Garment Pavilion were very puzzled. Was there really a god in this world? But the ninjas of Akatsuki organization indeed had fanatical expression, as if they were representing God and had come here to recruit the disciples of Blood Garment Pavilion. They were very proud and arrogant. Bullshit, God. Don't you just want us to join you and become your pawns and cannon in your hands? Although we are at a disadvantage in this battle, but we don't know if there will be another battle. We Blood Garment Pavilion are not afraid of blood staining our clothes. You want us to become a group of cowards and become your subordinate slaves. You are not qualified. Hearing the words of Conan, Scarlet Flame was the first to stand up. If not for the fact that Conan was a woman, Scarlet Flame might have already started cursing. But although these words were not so eloquent, but it was enough to motivate the disciples of Blood Garment Pavilion behind the 4 altar masters. There were a lot of young people in the headquarters of Blood Garment Pavilion. Being young meant being more unyielding, and they didn't have the almost greasy sleekness of those older people. Many of them had already stood up, regardless of whether they were injured or not, regardless of whether they were about to die or not. One by one, they began to roar towards the heaven. That's right! Blood staining our clothes, we are not afraid. This is our Blood Garment Pavilion. The slightly older people beside them wanted to pull them back, but all the young people remained unmoved. Instead they shouted even more loudly. Blood staining our clothes, we are not afraid. Blood staining our clothes, we are not afraid. Blood staining our clothes, we are not afraid. Nangongja stood in the attic and looked at the roaring youngsters of Blood Garment Pavilion with a smile. Blood Garment Pavilion, isn't this still Blood Garment Pavilion? You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.